Hello again, friends! And you are our friends, and this episode is brought to you by the Saudi Arabian Tourism Bureau. Come, you never know what could happen. I'm your host, the great Brian Last, and welcome to Jim Cornette's Drive Thru, and of course, the star of the Drive Thru. The man will be answering your questions. He was once a post office ninja. He'll be reviewing WWE's Elimination Chamber. Everyone wear all your clothes in a little bit. But here he is, the star of the Drive Thru, Mr. Jim Cornette.
Are you fucking rambling? What are you rambling and meandering about? They don't have to wear their clothes if they don't want to, for one thing. But they can. They don't have to. It's a clothing optional program.
Well, not in Saudi Arabia.
Well, no, only for the women in Saudi Arabia. They have to keep their clothes. Well, But see, you don't know about these things because fucking hands and faces are still skin. I believe they should have wrapped them up in some wrapping paper and then painted them from head to toe like the girl in Goldfinger, just in case anything popped out, so that we didn't see anything.
Are you a big James Bond fan?
Oh, it's going to be another one of these days, eh? Yes. As a matter, are you a James Bond fan? Have you ever been in a Turkish prison? Yes, I enjoy the classic Bond movies. They've gotten so many and so numerous, and in some cases, like everything else, so ridiculous in modern times that I can't quote you chapter and verse on them. But the Sean Connerys, the Roger Mooreses, the one George Lazenby, big fan. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da.
Big fan of the one George Lazenby.
Big fan of the one George Lazenby because of Diana Rigg.
Okay, that's a good reason.
There you go. See?
Well, speaking of good reasons, I'm sure there's a good reason we are back with you here today. And of course, there are many, many reasons.
Again, are you just giving people time to take their clothes off or whatever? Possibly they could empty the dishwasher or vacuum or what. I got to be honest with you. There was a lot of wrestling on this weekend, and we're going to talk about, obviously, you mentioned there was SmackDown on Friday night from the WWE. There's a couple of things on there we'll call attention to, bemoan, if you will. The offering from AEW on Friday night, I got a chance to actually see Jay White. And see what as Arn Anderson said, what's causing all this? And then, of course, there was the multiple hour extravaganza from they weren't in Riyadh. Were they in Jihad, Saudi Arabia?
No, Jihad's not a place. It's I guess it's a state of mind. Yeah, it's a state of mind.
Well, they were in a state of emergency or a state of confusion or a state of chaos or a state of denial. What state were they in?
Maybe a state of denial, because from the videos I saw of them hanging out in Saudi Arabia, everyone was having a ball.
It did seem like it's just a fun place to be. Well, your face will hurt from smiling. It's a happier place that, we ought to go to Saudi Arabia instead of Disney World. It's a happier place now, according to what the WWE would have us believe.
Check out our beautiful stadium and our runway, and stay on our runway for a long time.
Yes. Well, now they got out without incident this time around.
And that's progress. That's progress.
That's progress. And again, as long as you're not female and you don't want to, you won't get sunburned. There again, Saudi Arabia tourism, that can be a great slogan to the 50% of the population of the world that's female. Come, you won't get sunburned. Just a thought. I'm giving these ideas out for free. But there was a lot of wrestling this weekend. And, Brian, I remember when I was just a wee little fellow, just knee-high to a grasshopper. Now, when I was a kid, and even when I passed kiddom, and it was before I got in the business, up till the age of 20, 21, the most exciting, and also until the VCR era came in especially, the most exciting time of the week was to be able to sit down in front of the TV and watch the wrestling show. And you only got an hour before everything went to hell, you only got an hour, maybe an hour and a half, depending on your local market, once a week. because you only had 3 stations, and you would sit down in front of the television 15 minutes early. That's why Lance Russell used to brag in Memphis, being a program director at WHBQ as well as hosting the wrestling program. He got all the ratings. The Saturday morning, the 11 o'clock Saturday morning when the wrestling program came on the air was the hour of the week there was the highest turn-ons of televisions in the city of Memphis. That was another one of their statistics.
That's an amazing stat.
Well, I mean, they all were, but I'm just saying, so it was an exciting time. You sit down 15 minutes early, you got a drink because you don't want to get up and go to the kitchen, you got your snacks or whatever. I would have my notepad, and then for a few years, I'd have my cassette recorder ready to go. And boom, and you'd watch the wrestling show, and then as soon as it was over, you'd say, I can't wait till next week.
When you say cassette recorder, you don't mean VCR or beta. You mean actually recording just audio, correct?
No, audio cassette recorder. Yeah, one of these days, people are going to hear those. Hopefully sooner than it's been. As Mama Cornette used to say, it won't be as long as it's been. I've got somebody working on a project also. These feather bottoms, it's a big family. A big family. A lot of wait till I tell you what I found out. I'll tell you on the experience. I'm getting more details, but I found out about Hotchkiss's other set of uncles. See, Fanny and Felcher are his aunt and uncle on his mother's left side. But on the other side of the father's side of the family, holy mackerel. Anyway, so that was an exciting time. And then...
You created more family members than Blackjack Mulligan in promo.
No, I'm telling you, it's a heck of a family, and they've intermarried in so many different ways. So anyway, what I was about to say was, where was I going with this? Oh, then when the VCR came in, it wasn't quite as urgent because before the VCR, you had to watch a TV program when it aired, or elsewise you were never going to. In the case of wrestling, you'd never see it again. There were no reruns. It was gone. But then you would always run to get to the VCR when you could if you weren't available when it aired and you'd taped it. I remember the happiest evening of my life in the 80s was when we first went to work for Crockett and he moved us to Atlanta, and I've told that story. But one of the byproducts was that when we were in like Columbus, Georgia is an hour and a half away from where I was living, I'd be home by around midnight on Saturday night. Domino's was still open. Call and get the biggest fucking pizza they had. I've already got the soft drinks on ice. And I would start at Pedicino's Superstars of Wrestling block. I had the VCRs running while I was gone, so I'd start at the 8 o'clock start, and I would watch multiple hours of all the wrestling programs from around the country until about 6 in the morning. And that was just because we were off on most Sundays. So it was a nice little vacation there. But anyway, the point I was trying to make is it used to be an anticipatory delight. You used to sit down early, get all your apparatuses, and enjoy the wrestling. So the Friday night shows and the Saturday at noon extravaganza from Jihad, I've got them all on the DVR. And so on Sunday afternoon, I've finished signing a lot of things for Hotchkiss, for the website. We'll talk about that in a minute. And I said, all right, I told Stace, I said, I'm going to go watch these programs. I'm going to unload the dishwasher first, and then I'll go watch these programs. So she comes back about 20 or 25 minutes later. I'm in the TV room. She said, "What are you going to?" Oh, I'm going to vacuum the TV room first. Then I'm going to go watch those programs. And she comes back about 30 minutes later, and I'm outside in the garage. And I was like, "Well, I just wanted to straighten up these boxes." And she said, "Before you give yourself a self-kidney transplant or something, why don't you just go get this shit over with? Remove your own gallbladder is next on the list." I was doing the most mundane things that I could think of to do that needed to be done before I had to sit down and actually subject myself to the offerings from these fine organizations. So I'm still a little dreary. I haven't got my spark back. It was whooped out of me. by the hours and hours of this programming.
Well, we'll see if this show today can bring your spark back.
But I do actually, before we get started, I know it's your program. I say that every week, and I mean it sincerely, wholeheartedly.
Oh, that's good to hear.
From every cockle in my heart, I mean that. But I do have a couple of emails, and this first one it's not directed to me. I'm being spoken about in the third person. It doesn't have a heading like Dear So-and-so. It just starts out with the message. But it was forwarded to me by someone in the empire there that apparently works on these programs, because it went to the official CornyDriveThru email address. That's CornyDriveThru@gmail.com. That is the official one, right? I'm not being hacked here.
That is the official address, CornyDriveThru@gmail.com. Send all your questions there. Once.
Once. Well, this was sent to someone else talking about me, but I somehow obtained a copy of it. So I did it real brief. I suspect that asking Jim to stop doing things only encourages him to do it again. So please try using your trusted judgment here. I can and have listened to Jim Cornette talk wrestling all day long, but there is a limit to how many interesting stories about watching Harley Quinn take a shit in the yard I can stand. I have had enough of these stories. Could he maybe limit it to once a month instead of every single episode? Thanks and good luck. From Rob in Toronto.
Let me take the credit / blame. I did forward this to you, but it was only because I was laughing so hard when I read it. Because, now I know sometimes, I don't pay attention to you, but usually I do. And I don't remember that many.
Oh, thank you.
And I don't remember that many segments about Harley taking a shit. That's what made me laugh so hard about it. But I thought you should see it.
It's probably been mentioned more often lately, and peripheral references or whatever, because of the weather and the ordeals that haven't been going through in order to let her do these functions. But the last thing I want to do is upset Rob from Toronto, so I'm not going to mention the incredible doubleheader she did this morning. I was going to talk about it because I was so proud of the little baby, but I'm not going to upset Rob or any of the other listeners that don't want to hear about Harley Quinn's poop stories, talking about how she went out this morning and did her morning Russo just like she's normally supposed to do.
Oh, you did say that.
And she was a good little girl, and then she run right in the house, and then she had her breakfast, and then I'm not going to tell the people because Rob would be offended that moments after her breakfast, she was hopping up and down and looking at me, and I let her out again, and she went right over there and right on top of that Russo that she had taken just scant moments before, she deposited another Twinkle Toes right on top of that. But I'm not going to tell the people because I don't want Rob to be upset.
Do you think Rob has a dog?
I don't. Maybe Rob is a dog. Maybe that's why. Maybe Rob's jealous.
That's why he's emailing
Rob
about this.
Rob is jealous that Harley Quinn gets talked about so much and just made up that cock and bull story and then had his owner send the email. You never know. But I have another email.
Oh, good.
Because I didn't, this one came directly to me at the fancy Dan new contact apparatus I've got on the new JimCornette.com, where people can send me these varieties of comments. This was not forwarded to me by someone in the Arcadian Vanguard Empire over there. Right directly to me from Chris from Glasgow. Dear Jim, Brian Last is a food moron. I was willing to accept that he doesn't put toppings on a pizza, even though he's wrong. I was willing to accept that he doesn't like a Philly cheesesteak. Again, what's not to love about a cheesesteak? But not putting cheese on a burger, fuck me sideways. Gooey cheese makes almost any food better, and I'm almost positive that Brian has had a head injury at some point.
I agree. Fuck you sideways.
Well, you don't know if he might be taken. He might be engaged or betrothed.
I'm being lectured about a Philly cheesesteak from a guy in Ireland.
Well, see, it's far and wide. Even they know it all around the world.
Oh,
they know what's going on.
He doesn't know.
And you're just hopelessly behind the times, bro. You're out of touch with the worldwide dining public. You're out of touch. It's past you. Food has passed you by, Brian Last.
No, food hasn't caught up to me yet.
It's gone so far past you, it's going to come up behind you and catch up with you again.
I'll be the trendsetter.
There you go. You know, is somebody going to trademark that now?
Yeah, Chris Jericho.
There you go. The influencer, the trendsetter, the trademarker.
Yeah, that's what he should call himself, the trademarker.
The trademarker.
No one gives a shit about any of these things he keeps trademarking. He should just call himself the trademarker.
And then the gimmick is anytime anybody tries to do anything, he comes out and shuts it down because he's got it trademarked.
And then you could hook him up with Mark Sterling, and he could be his lawyer that trademarks everything, and they
there you
pull
go
something out.
Yeah, Mark, is that trademark? That guy just did a headlock. Hey, drop that fucking headlock. Let go of that hoe. 1, 2, 3. I got that trademark.
He can go from Smart Mark Sterling to Trademark Sterling.
It writes itself. And here he is now, the trademarker, Chris Jericho, with Trademark Sterling. Perfect. And then they could have a little sidekick named Copyright.
They were about to start the match. Oh, he trademarked the collar and elbow tie-up. Now they have to start a different way. Diabolical.
And then anytime somebody won with a new finish, he could come out and demand that they pay him 15% of the winner's purse because he trademarked the finishing move.
This is good stuff.
I'm telling you. Anyway, speaking of good stuff that's trademarked and copyrighted, great segue into JimCornette.com and the Cornette's Collectibles store where you're finding all kinds of great products. I know you are because you're buying them like crazy. And I urge you to continue to do so. The T-shirts, the autographed pictures, the Cult of Cornette membership certificates that have been very popular, the behind-the-curtain graphic novel, autographed full-color collector's item for comic and wrestling fans, and, of course, the ever-popular classic wrestling DVDs are on sale now. Some orders from just last weekend, just a week ago or 9 days or whatever it was since we went on sale. Some have been delivered. Many more are already in the mail. A huge amount have already been personally hand-signed, autographed by me to specifications, and have been deposited with Hotchkiss Featherbottom, and he's working on that feverishly over at the Featherbottom place. They're talking about moving now because it's Hotchkiss and it's Fanny and it's Felcher and there's a few other Featherbottoms. And now with all of the merchandise fulfillment, they're thinking about getting a double wide. I don't know whether they can take that step or not, but anyway, the stuff is being shipped out. We're getting the first thank yous for the quick service. And if you want any of those things I mentioned, I would encourage you to get your order in before Saturday, March 5th, because we're going to fuck with the Featherbottoms on Saturday, March 5th. It's going to be at noon Eastern, by the way, the final Christmas variant action figures that we've got in stock are going on sale. These are it. This design's not being redone. There's less than 400 remaining. And they will go on. And we're not going to crash this thing by cracky, because it's been stress tested over the past few months, and our online merchant mavens are expecting a spike. And but anyway, Saturday, March 5th at noon, the last less than 400 of the Christmas variant figures will go on sale, and that will slow things down a little bit because I'm still signing all these figures by hand, but still not as bad as it was. But if you want anything else besides a figure before you get gummed up or glommed up or whatever the case, jump on that before the 5th.
If merchandise in the 70s, if you had the capabilities that you have today, and there were wrestlers who were entrepreneurs, are there wrestlers you could think of that would have been able to manage an operation like you're doing? Maybe not as large because you have a little more time, you're not on the road, but just in terms of really, if you were able to make as much merch And if there was mail order and there was some sort of platform to get it out there, were there any wrestlers who would have actually been inclined, other than Les Thatcher? Are there any wrestlers that would have been inclined to do it?
If you were inclined to make and manage much merch, you threw me there for a second because I thought you were going to ask who would have been the people who would have sold a lot of stuff or whatever the case, but it's who would have. Well, you hit on the answer. Nobody would have had the time because you were literally home. If you were home in the course of a 24-hour day, it was several hours at most. So nobody would have had the time. Some guys, probably the guys that were underneath preliminary talent or, something like that would have probably been better administrators of a merchandise business. And the main event top guys, it would have probably been a massive fuck up. And either the shit would have never gone out, or I don't even know if they'd have got all the money or what the fuck. They would have been able to keep track of shit. Cause it just, it usually is that way, that the stars are not necessarily the most meticulous business people or record keepers or whatever. But Les Thatcher not only, had he didn't actually produce his own merchandise. I mean, I'm sure he did something of himself, but he produced merchandise for Crockett Promotions and a few of the other companies with the magazines and et cetera. So it wasn't like he was physically having to do everything from, taking the pictures, which he did, and writing, which he did, and taking to the printer, which he did, but he didn't have to go and sell them in every, arena or do the mail order stuff. At least that was through the office in a lot of cases. So, and it was for other people. You've seen the Briscoe Brothers T-shirt. And who else was Thunderbolt Patterson was there at that time, was a hot baby face, right? That was the early T-shirts he did. And Lawler did a lot of the artwork for that stuff because he was just a young rookie fella making his way and was a talented artist.
Actually, I think Lawler did all the art for those shirts. Lawler was doing a lot of different things. Like he was doing art in the magazines at that point still.
Yes, and it started with the Patriot in Wrestling Monthly, right?
Well, he was submitting art to the magazines even before then.
But that's true. I was going to say he may have been submitting, but was it printed? But yes, I think he had some things printed even before that. That's how he got the strip. Do you remember the backstory on the Patriot?
Oh, who died? Was it his peg? He killed someone? Oh. I literally own the rights to it, and I should know the fucking story.
Wasn't it that the masked heel in the piece had killed his father in the ring?
That's what it was.
Because Lawler, being a comic book fan, borrowed liberally from the Batman origin motivation, and then he adopted the guise of the Patriot in order to fight for good and restore the honor and integrity of masked wrestlers and track down that evil. And what was the heel's name?
I don't even remember, but the coolest thing was actually just him going territory by territory and wrestling the top heels.
Yeah.
And Lawler's drawing like Ray Stevens and Saul Weingroff and all these different characters every week, every month in the magazine. God damn it.
Same Patriot time, same Patriot channel. What was his finish? Do you remember the finish?
I don't.
The Uncle Slam.
See, that's great.
Is that where they got now? You need to reprint, since your archives includes those issues. You need to reprint a booklet of all of the Patriots' adventures, so that people could catch up on all this stuff.
Del Wilkes became the Patriot before Eddie Gilbert booked in Global, which is the only reason I question whether it could be. If it was Eddie Gilbert booking, I know what the answer would be. Was the gimmick based on the Lawler comic strip?
I mean, it's awful coinkadinkle, as Junkyard Dog used to say. It's awful coinkadinkle that it's just almost the exact same thing, but at the same time, in wrestling, would it have been a stretch to create a patriotic red, white, and blue masked wrestler named the Patriot? So one would think, but at the same time, one cannot point the positive finger at the plagiarizer.
I also love the idea the Patriot's arch nemesis is not some foreign menace. It's the Dark Patriot. It's some bizarro version of him.
Well, that's when Eddie was booking. I was like, put Doug in a bodysuit, cover him up, and see if we can get something out of that. But the Dark Patriot. Yeah, because, well, he was patriotic of all the dark places. The depths of the Mariana Trench and the most horrible jungles of Cambodia.
Well, you were from the dark side.
Well, there you go. But we were just talking about the condition of no light because we were the Midnight Express.
The condition of no light. All right.
Condition. That would be a condition of no. If we were on Jeopardy, it'd be like dark. What is the condition of no light? Dark.
Well, speaking of dark, it was a dark day on Saturday because in the middle of the day, I always forget there is the event in Saudi Arabia until like minutes before it's going to start because I'm so thrown off by a wrestling show starting at noon or whatever. But of course, Saturday, Elimination Chamber in Saudi Arabia.
Well, now there was a couple of things on Friday Night SmackDown that affected this soiree that they were having over there. Can we discuss those first so we don't get all cattywampers and behind on ourselves?
We can now. The thing we talked about last week, the Charlotte Ronda table bunk spot.
Yeah.
Was that on this episode?
Yes, and they fixed it.
They had
well,
to.
they fixed it by trickery, camera trickery, deceit, if you will. When, as you will recall, when last we left our space family, Charlotte had stood up and Ronda reached out and grabbed her head and just went, and Charlotte didn't know what the fucking went with it, and it was just all fucked up. What they did was they switched to that. We saw a fan cam, just uncut, whole ring, right? Everybody, it was ugly as a mud fence. The camera shot that they got on television when it happened was the handheld that was in the ring behind Charlotte. And you'll know what I'm talking about. When Ronda reached out and grabbed her and her head started to go down, they did one of those goofy zoom in real quick and outs like they do to cover up that the guys don't know how to work. And the zoom in was so tight that you couldn't tell what happened. And the zoom out, you saw Charlotte flying backwards and you heard a bonk. The microphones were sitting on the table, so that could have been Charlotte's hands hitting the table, which would have been serendipity for them because it was a nice sound, or they could have put it in post, who knows. But one way or another, you couldn't fucking tell because you couldn't see what happened. So they covered it, believe it or not. But otherwise than that, oh boy. Did you see the segment with the contract signing for the Rousey event?
I did
on
not.
SmackDown.
No, I did not.
Well, it was led off the show. Cruella DeVille comes out with her arm in a sling from where she got armbarred on what Raw was it, previous episode. Here comes Charlotte. Then here comes Naomi and Ronda Rousey together for the contract signing. Poor Adam Pearce, who just has to, unfortunately, preside over all of these things.
You know what his email is going to be when he resigns? First of all, fuck Ronda and Naomi.
No, I don't think they're at Sid and Rock yet, but first of all, Ronda Rousey. Again, she comes out and she and Naomi make their way skipping to the ring. She's smiling. She's got her arms around Naomi, the Dayglow Shirley Temple herself. She's already been made one of the girls. I can understand if it was a reluctant situation where Ronda Rousey, you're going to be forced to team with Becky Lynch or Charlotte or whoever, a main event. girl and she doesn't really want to, but now they put her in a position where she without the game face on that makes her such a badass or made her such a badass on her way to the octagon or the cage or whatever group she was fighting for MMA. She's palling around with the other. She's just one of the girls on the roster. They resist the temptation every time, except with Brock Lesnar when they was forced on him because he won't work but fucking 5 times a year or whatever. And but they keep getting the Ronda Rouseys, the Dan Severns, the Ken Shamrocks, any other MMA figure, and they become one of the boys or one of the girls within a short period of time. And in the way that they're presented, the way that they interact with everybody else. And Naomi and Ronda just sit down on one side of the table, and there's Cruella and Charlotte on the other side, and they just bickered at each other and talked over each other, and it made them all mostly just nattering, bitchy girls in high-pitched voices, nattering, which is, I think, what they were going for. So Cruella, who I love her look. I've now seen one of her matches. I love her look. She gave him a last chance to back out because she's thrown in a new stipulation. Ronda Rousey has to wrestle with one arm tied behind her back at the Saudi Arabia Elimination Chamber Super Show. And even if, and we'll talk about in a minute why that's as a stupid stipulation, but even if you didn't mind them doing that, Ronda should not have been happy about it. But she just laughed and immediately signed like, I don't care. Okay, even if you think you can kick the shit out of Cruella and her arms in a sling from what you did to her, Charlotte's on the team also. You're going to fight Charlotte just willy-nilly, just frivolously agree to fight Charlotte with one hand tied behind your back. It's just fucking stupid. Why even do it if she's going to laugh about it? So she signs the deal, and then they cover up the head spot, and then the baby faces turned the table over, and the heels scampered out, and that was the end of that. So that set up the stipulation on the Super Show that they went through with, and she did wrestle with one arm tied behind her back at one point, and as it usually does, it slid over to the side through the course of the proceedings. That's what happened there.
All right.
You missed one. Actually, this was worth watching SmackDown, but you don't have to watch SmackDown. I think it's out on the WWE's Twitter now or whatever, wherever they put it. But the Undertaker Hall of Fame package. They had every major star of the last 20 years of the company on up to Steve Austin praising Taker. Highlights throughout his career. The editing was tremendous, as it always is from that company. 5 minutes was worth the whole show. Of course, it was a guy they're putting in the Hall of Fame. It's retired and showing how great their program used to be. But if you saw 5 minutes of SmackDown, you need to see that. And they got our boys back together again, as you know, Brian. Roman Reigns and Paul Heyman.
Yeah.
Back on SmackDown, back together. And I have to say that they come to the ring for the closing interview. It's going to be face-to-face. Roman Reigns and Bill Goldberg, face-to-face. Reigns and Heyman come out first with the whole Usos, the whole crew. But Paul Heyman here outshone even himself in toadying and stooging. I mean, he was standing there as Reigns gets in the ring before he does his acknowledge me. Paul is looking at him like he's seeing God and Paulie's the Pope. Maybe that's a wrong simile to draw since Paul's Jewish, of the Jewish faith. Who do you people look up to more than anybody?
Sandy Koufax.
Okay, so Paul is standing there beaming with this look on his face. It's like he was a blowfish and his face was widening out with a grin with love and admiration and beneficence for Sandy Koufax there in the form of Roman Reigns. And as he then Reigns does his acknowledge me thing, the people, he's milking them and it's great. And then he now says, "Now, wise man, celebrate me," or whatever. And he hands Paul the microphone. Paul takes it like he's been handed the golden chalice that Jesus Christ drunk Mary's breast milk out of, or whatever the fuck. Is that one of the lost treasures at the bottom of the money pit on Oak Island? The chalice that Jesus drank Mary's breast milk out of?
I guess so.
It was a primitive form of a pump back then. So anyway, then Paul does, again, even for him, a magnificent, a stunningly beautiful verbal blowjob for Roman Reigns. And how great he had that you're having a chance to see, the Michael Jordan in his prime and this and that guy. And then he knocked the Saints. Drew Brees, right? Apparently sucked. Yeah, well. And he got a who dat chant going because they're in New Orleans. So he got a who dat chant going when he knocked the Saints. And I thought, this is fucking great. It's come full circle. And honestly, Heyman was probably the only one in the building that knew that it came from the Saints because they got it from the dog. So now dog came in 79, was it? So 43 years later, it's come all the way back around where it started at the wrestling shows at the downtown Municipal Auditorium. The Saints fans picked it up, and now it's come back to the wrestling arena.
And we're finally in a day and age where Paul feels comfortable working ringside in New Orleans.
Yeah, and can even challenge people for a fight and not get taken up on it. God, yeah, I'll tell you what. Was that where he was? That was the week before, I guess. He was someplace they had footage of him during a dark match challenging the fans to fight. And everyone was, it is great manager shit, right? But you didn't do it in New Orleans. You minded your P's and Q's and tried not to look at those fans. Just don't look at me, boy. Don't eyeball me. Anyway, so he did a masterful job, and then Goldberg's music interrupted, and Brian, I swear to you, if I'm lying, I'm flying, and my feet have not left the ground. On an in-ring promo interruption, where the guys are in the ring cutting a promo, and suddenly the music plays for the interruption, they still cut to a fucking shot of Goldberg's locker room door and the hand knocked. Sir, it's time for your interruption. He came through the goddamn locker room door. He was waiting in his locker room until it was time for his promo interruption. And then out he comes.
He's the smartest guy. Everyone's always getting attacked in the locker room, not Goldberg.
Yeah, he's got his own, won't let anybody in. That's what the security's for. So he comes out and they go face to face. And the people are chanting Goldberg, as they do. And he's still a name, and he's still over. And we've mentioned it's not Goldberg's fault that he's 52 years old, and they still have to keep calling on him and his contemporaries because they can't get anybody new over because of all the reasons that we talk about everybody on the show every week. But at this point, they even made a package out of it on the show, as you saw, Saudi Arabia show, of, hey, the old age is just a number, and I still think I've got it, and I'm going to defy time and gravity, and et cetera. And that's a great story in all sports. The aging quarterback or the boxer past his prime that still wins but whatever the case. But goddamn. Diminishing returns at this point, as we'll talk about when we get to the match, but all he had to do was say, I apologize, you're not next. When it comes to the Universal title, I'm next. And then they played the music, and then it was done. So not exactly leaving the people at a fever pitch, waiting to see this cataclysmic confrontation. And, you don't get the idea that they're waiting to tear each other limb from limb.
Yeah, Goldberg's a smart guy, too. He realizes if they're going to get the most out of him, stick with Heyman. Heyman knows exactly what to do with him every time.
Well, but here is the problem. That is the problem. Heyman knows exactly what to do with him, but it relies basically on the things that he's still able to do. And those are getting fewer and farther between. Should we leap into the chamber?
We could leap into the Elimination Chamber Spectacular, which took place Saturday in some places this past week in Saudi Arabia.
What day was it over there in Jihad?
I don't think it's Jihad, but I'm not sure what day it was in whatever town they were in.
Well, maybe it was Friday night and it's just Saturday at noon here. Or maybe it was Saturday night and it's just earlier here, or whatever the case. But I think everybody was, even though it might be a different time for you when it started, everybody was united in not being able to wait for it to be over. You think?
I think that's true.
Okay. Well, the first match, as we were just referencing, was Roman Reigns and Goldberg for the Universal Championship, which is different than the World Championship because the universe is bigger, of course, but still they've got two world champions. So they couldn't put the smaller championship, the one that only encompasses this planet, on first because that's being contested in a 5 or 6 man, however many were, elimination chamber. So they put the biggest world title match on first to jerk the curtain right after they mentioned the late, and apparently this was a shoot. They had a late arriving crowd because they had a traffic jam outside this big ass stadium. Apparently it was camel lock everywhere and people couldn't get in.
Come on.
No, every corner. It was like, even though the lights would change, the next camel couldn't move. So your camel couldn't get out and they blocked the interstate. You see it in New York.
Well, you see a lot of things in New York.
Well, that's true. And so the people probably, I guess maybe some of them miss this, but apparently there was a traffic situation outside so the Universal title is on. They did great packages, as they always do. We've talked about this, but the packages are always impeccable packages from the WWE. But by the time that they blew off all the fucking pyro and played the packages for these two guys in this issue and did the announcer obligatory intros and billboard, etc., and hello, Fubar Makafakaloob and Slapko Fudd, good to see you again. It was 17 minutes into the show before the bell rang for the first match. And I was getting a little antsy at that point. But then I figured out why it took so long to get to the start of it, because it wasn't going to take long from there to get to the finish. The crowd was hot. They may be afraid not to be. I'm not sure how they've been recruited to be part of this extravaganza, but if they're allowed of their own free will to come in on their own, I guess, especially if they're men, they're seeing entertainment the likes of which I would assume they don't get a chance to see often over there, have until recently, so they're hot. And everybody still watching wrestling at this point knows who Goldberg is and knows what these people know what's going on with this show because they made a big deal out of it. But do we have a read, Brian, on how smart are the fans in Saudi Arabia? I mean, I don't mean, I'm sure that Slapko is probably the smartest, fan in Saudi Arabia, but I'm talking about the average person. They know it's entertainment, but they don't know the machinations behind it, or where are they at over there?
I have no idea. And also, I'm not even sure what the crowd makeup is in terms of, what percentage of that crowd actually paid for tickets, what percentage of the crowd were given tickets by the kingdom. I really don't know how it works.
Well, anyway, everybody on this side of the pond, over here in this country at least, and watching on, the streaming everywhere, everybody still watching wrestling knows that Goldberg wasn't going to probably win this match, right? Because their booking has already been fucked up. And that would just kind of make it even screwier. So that's what I'm talking about, the law of diminishing returns, when you have to bring a guy back multiple times, but each time you sort of treat it like that it's the last time. See The Last Stampede. And then 2 years later, he's out of retirement again.
No, the next year. And then the year after that.
I'm sorry. I was going to say 2 years later and then the year after that, but it was, So, I think it was a flat-footed punch and kick match with their big moves sprinkled in, because, like you said, Heyman. But Goldberg hits a spear, and then Roman Reigns just immediately turns a jackhammer into a rock bottom, and Reigns hits a Superman punch, but then Goldberg spears him again. And at one point, you see Roman Reigns got a face like Goldberg's head was bleeding again. Does he get busted open somehow hard way in every match he has?
He was bleeding also, I think, from his shoulder at one point. So, yeah, I think so. I had the same thought while watching the match.
God, it's like Steen one time. We wanted to put him and somebody in Ring of Honor in a First Blood match, right? And he called us, me and Delirious. He said, well, I have a skin condition. Some of my armpit bleeds randomly sometimes. What? Yeah, so maybe it wouldn't be good me to be in a First Blood match. I'm like, what the? Just wear a goddamn t-shirt. Anyway, so Reigns gets a front face lock, and I see that Goldberg's head's bleeding again, and Reigns is holding it, and that was it. So, I mean, I know he's 52, and but still, it's kind of like Dick the Bruiser. Flat-footed punch and kick. Let's go out on the floor for a second, rattle each other around the table and the rail, back in, couple big moves, and he just choked Goldberg out, and that is kind of a flat way to beat fucking Goldberg. But since this was the last match on his contract, once again, do you think are they going to close the chapter by the last time you see Goldberg in a WWE ring is getting choked out by Roman Reigns, and then in a year and a half, they got to bring him back, and they write another chapter on the end of the book they've already closed and add that on like a fucking screen door on a submarine or
In terms of wrestling, we never got the payoff to the thing. Was it last time in Saudi Arabia, Goldberg and Lashley, where they beat up Goldberg's son?
Oh, I forgot about that.
Yeah, so we never got the payoff. We don't know if Goldberg will just be back the next time, the Saudis want him. It's hard to say, like, what do you do with him? He is the kind of guy as a name that you would think, oh, we should position something special for him at WrestleMania, but the law of diminishing returns, as you said, and as we're going to say a lot, when it comes to some of this stuff, you've seen him so often. When was the last time he won a match? What are you going to do with him? And I actually thought, you could say the finish was flat-footed and you wouldn't be wrong, but I actually thought it was kind of depressing. You don't want to see Dick the Bruiser get choked out. Well, that's not the way you want to see him go. Yeah, I mean, beyond it just being a flat finish, considering who was in it, it's not the way you want to see it end. So I don't think it'll be the last time we see him.
Yeah, and it just, nobody was ready for it to happen because most of the time, the other problem kicks in and the matches go too long and wear out their welcome. This was, could it have been 6 minutes? The entrances were longer.
And it was exactly the match you thought it would be. Big move match. That's what you have to do with Goldberg.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. It should have been a big move that flattened him for a 1-2-3 decisive victory for Roman Reigns. I can understand that, but just grabbing it and holding it and he don't get out of it, it was not only decisive, but it was flat. It was boring. It was kind of like,
Is that what it was like?
It was kind of like, It wasn't really, it was,
Well, if Goldberg's unhappy with the way he's being used right now, maybe when he gets home, when he gets back to the States, he could sit down and call somebody to talk about his problems. call somebody, Goldberg.
He could call somebody. And you heard me go, I'm going to need to call somebody to figure this one out. But then you jumped right in there to talk about his problems. And folks, if you have depression caused by a large Samoan choking you out in front of 25,000 people in Saudi Arabia, then possibly you should have somebody to talk to. Or if you live a normal life in a normal place and you have normal problems, and everybody does, then you need somebody to talk to as well. And that's where the folks at BetterHelp come in. They have been sponsoring our fine podcast for quite some time, and we've had feedback galore from the members of the Cult of Cornette that sent the email saying that BetterHelp made a change in their life, helped them in a positive way, or in other words, did something beneficial for their positive well-being, and they can do the same thing for you. BetterHelp will assess your needs and match you with your own licensed professional therapist. You can start communicating in under 48 hours. It's professional therapy done securely online with a broad range of expertise that may not be locally available, or you might just not want to go out and talk to somebody that lives 3 blocks away from you about your various issues. So this way it's professional and remote. And actually, in any type of interaction with other human beings, as we know, is best done in limited scheduled doses and remotely. BetterHelp is committed to facilitating great therapeutic matches. They make it easy and free to change therapists if you need, and it's more affordable than traditional offline therapy. So, visit their website, BetterHelp, that's H-E-L-P, betterhelp.com/JCE. You can read the testimonials that are posted daily from the over 2 million people. 2 million now, Brian. We bumped them up 1 million. When they started with us, they were over 1 million. We brought them another 1 million in just the last 2 or 3 years. Join the over 2 million people who have taken charge of their mental health with the help of an experienced professional at BetterHelp.com. You get 10% off your first month's services when you go to BetterHelp.com/JCE. They're actually recruiting additional therapists to take care of the demand that we alone, Brian, are sending them.
And, I just checked because you said 20,000 there, and then you talked about millions. The actual attendance in Jeddah at the Superdome, that's a trademark infringement if I've ever heard of one.
Hey, wait a minute.
33,328.
They should have just put 5 more people in.
To get all threes?
Yeah, just 5 more. Why not? BetterHelp.
BetterHelp. Well, someone better help WWE as we transition back to this review. And, of course...
Oh, we got to go back to this. I think I'd rather talk some more about BetterHelp. All right, the next match on the program was the Women's Elimination Chamber match. And again, I will accept the criticism that I'm not the biggest fan of the girls wrestling these days because it's been diluted and watered down and etc. But can anybody suggest to me that it is a good idea to have 2 of the exact same gimmick matches on the same card, whether it's men and women or men and men or women and women or donkeys in Tijuana or whatever the case? Because it's like having dessert before you have dessert. It's a hat on a hat. Excuse me, Brian, before you have a piece of birthday cake, would you like some cake? And when they don't take it seriously, in the Women's Elimination Chamber were a couple of the top stars in the company. You've got Bianca Belair, and you've got Rhea Ripley, who should be a couple of the top stars in the company. You've also got Liv Morgan. They're trying for some reason.
Oh, she's good.
You've got Alexa Bliss, who's 5 feet nothing and weighs 95 pounds with rocks in her pockets and wet shoes.
She's not good.
And Doudrop, who found all the weight that Alexa Bliss has failed to gain over her lifetime. And this, you got it. This would have been like if the fucking Mulkeys had been booked in a War Games. So anyway.
Against who? Against the Gladiators or against someone else?
That's what, again, anybody, just, And did I mention Nikki Ass? And Nikki Ass and Liv Morgan started, and all the women were covered neck to toe in their outfits. I resist the urge to do the Bobby Eaton line. Yeah, he had tape from his wrist all the way to his ankle. Rhea Ripley looked great. She looked like Catwoman. A couple of the other girls looked like they'd rolled out of bed at a slumber party with their pajamas on. It's ridiculous. Again, at least I remember the first time they had one girls match over there, they just wore sweatpants or whatever. And they were just blousy, flousy coverings. At least they're letting them color up a little bit. But by Jesus H. Christ, why have a girl's... It's like a low-fat Twinkie. If you can't eat the fat, don't eat the Twinkie. If the girls can't go over and do the same thing that they do, wearing the same thing that they do in every other part of the world, don't send the fucking girls. Is anybody going to be goddamn mortified? Oh, I can't go to Saudi Arabia, potentially risk my life in a hostage situation? Nevertheless, Rhea Ripley came in and looked like Catwoman, but nothing really happened. But then she beat Nikki Ass with the Riptide, thank goodness. And then Alexa Bliss came in, and this little microscopic, diminutive amoeba of a girl started beating people up. And I started zoning out because, honestly, Rhea Ripley would disappear, as you saw, for minutes at a time. But finally, toward the end of the thing, it's Ripley against Belair, and there was the most excitement of the match for about 30 seconds, and then the other girls got in the way and muddied the water all up. And then Belair beat Rhea Ripley, and that meant that the last two were Belair and Alexa Bliss. So what the fuck is worse? Her phony bullshit gimmick that it's not hers, they gave it to her. She does it well. I've said many times she should be in all kinds of horror movies. She's a spooky little girl. She's also bigger than a hiccup, just barely. And so now Alexa Bliss then gets beat by Bianca Belair, but Ripley couldn't even go to the finish. Alexa Bliss was the second best girl in that match. She's the same height and 5 pounds lighter than little darling Dagmar. Look it up, kids. I didn't disappoint you with little Brutus. What'd you think, Brian?
I think, forget about the match itself, but you watch something like this in Rhea Ripley, even though she was dressed like Rob Halford, and Bianca Belair, who, again, no matter what's happening in life, she's swinging that hair and smiling. They seem like main eventers. They seem like stars. They're not small. They look athletic. I buy them as main eventers. There's a little bit of a history with them, so it's always nice to see them work. They work well together. They're top tier. I know you don't see it, and I'm sure this week she'll do something awful, but I see Liv Morgan a little bit below that, but not at the bottom. Liv Morgan is a really good female babyface if used right, and she has a connection with the crowd. The Nikki Ash thing is awful, and there's no redeeming value in a grown-up who thinks she's going to be a superhero, I guess is the gimmick. Doudrop does not do it for me. There's a little bit of a pun there somehow, but... And then Alexa Bliss.
Who do Doudrop do it for?
I don't know, but that's...
what do Doudrop do?
That's the dumbest name, and when they introduce her, they don't even say, like, a town or a weight, so it's just... And then coming to the ring, Doudrop! Like, that's it? Okay. It's like Meatloaf. Hey, she's the female Meatloaf.
There you go. At least Mantar chose his own fate. That was his gimmick that he brought to them and said, do this with me, right? But I'm sure that this was not Doudrop's first choice for how to be presented.
And Alexa Bliss, and I know there are a lot of hardcore, I know we have a lot of people listen to this show, and it'll probably surprise people, who are hardcore WWE fans. They want us to talk more about it. They hate AEW. And amongst some of them, they really like Alexa Bliss, and I don't get it. And you're right. She's super small compared to everyone else. And she's hitting big moves. She was gone for a while. She has some sort of supernatural gimmick where even though she's so small, she's not afraid of anyone. When you see that in a match where you have a Bianca and a Rhea, it stands out about what the problem is. You have the people here, and I'm going to include Liv Morgan on that side. You could even include Doudrop, really, who you could kind of treat seriously and have a serious women's division. And then you have the classic Vince McMahon stuff of the girl who thinks she's a superhero because she's not smart, I guess, to realize she's not. And the other girl who has magical powers and magical dolls that she does magical things with. And that's the problem. It's like, if there was a universal, if Alexa Bliss was like the Young Bucks and she would just go have a segment with her friends and do their own thing and not interfere with the rest of this, would be good. But I think that's part of the problem. You have top tier quality female wrestlers in WWE, but they always have to intermingle with that kind of stuff. The Nikki Ashes and the Alexa Blisses. And it takes away from everything else.
But she does her magical things with her magical dolls and her magical skills. That's what she says. Is she magically delicious, I wonder?
I don't know. Her segments aren't.
A little hard to swallow, is man. Speaking of hard to swallow. Oh boy, 2 girls matches in a row and another one still left to come. Which again, and they couldn't even break it up a little bit. This is why nothing is special, because as soon as something gets over, they give it to you endlessly. 2 elimination chambers, 2 world championships, 3 girls matches on the same show, back to back. Nothing is allowed to become different. But in this case, it was definitely different because they took the most inexperienced worker out of the 4 of these and decided to tie her arm behind her back. So boy, that'll... This is another example of what happens when you get a bunch of people writing wrestling that have never been in a ring, and the people that have been in the ring have to produce what the wrestling writers write. Instead, if you've been reading the writs he's written, you'll know they're really well-written writs. So, Charlotte and Cruella against Naomi and Ronda Rousey. And again... I love Ronda Rousey coming out in the gi, in the karate gi, martial arts flavor, right?
No monster makeup.
Well, no makeup at all. I don't know why that she does the weird eye makeup thing, which makes her look more like, who was it? Simone Signoret and Revenge of the Cat People or whatever. I love the karate gi, but no makeup, smiling and happy, makes her look like a cute little teenager. Like I said earlier, just fucking woke up late at a slumber party instead of the baddest bitch on the planet.
Did you see, forgive me for cutting you off, there was some interview I just saw, I didn't actually read the whole thing or even hear it, but the headline in various places I saw, maybe you read it, that Ronda said Vince told her to smile more. To embrace how happy she was and go out there and smile.
I bet you he did. Because here's the thing, Vince McMahon, if he's watched Ronda Rousey in a UFC fight or a mixed martial arts fight, it was that somebody at the studio said, "Here, why?" And he watched 2 minutes of it. But I can believe that because I've heard him do that to other baby faces before, but not somebody whose whole fucking presence was that she came out like she was in another world and was going to fucking kill somebody because it was a real fight. Anyway, I like the gi. I don't like the no makeup and no hairstyle to please the regressive sexual Neanderthals in Saudi Arabia. And I don't like the smiling and the happy because, as I said again, it just makes her, she's a cute girl, not the baddest bitch on the planet. And then, she gets in the ring and they do the deal where they tie her arm. They got the little waist gimmick there and they tie her arm behind her back. And then Cruella takes the sling off and throws it away because it was a heel plot, a ploy. And Ronda doesn't sell it. She's like, okay, the stipulations only matter to someone else that's not involved but watching if they matter to the people that are involved. So if it's positive or negative that you're supposed to feel about something, you need to register that. But again, Ronda's green, but who's going over this shit? And is she just disregarding or forgetting or not being told? Or this is the way it is? And again, subliminally, why do you want to take somebody whose last 2 public performances, the Royal Rumble, they let her, as we said, wander around. She's not an experienced worker. She doesn't know how to stay busy and ad lib and still keep her aura. She had to have things laid out for her. And in a single match or a tag team match, it's easier when you got multiple every girl for themselves matches, or you throw something else in her way, like tying her arm behind her back when she's not smooth and polished to begin with as far as working. So, like I said, in the Royal Rumble, she was left to fend for herself for a while in the Rumble. The head bonk spot at least didn't air on television, but people saw it on social media. Where was the other thing recently where she was left to she looks green? And if you keep putting her in positions where she's going to look green or she can't do the things that make her stand out, and she's not a veteran enough and experienced enough to bing, 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 it's not good. It's subliminally, people will remember these, especially in a short period of time, they'll remember these impressions, visual impressions, mental impressions that they've gotten of Ronda Rousey, and it diminishes even in your subconscious, it diminishes the way you feel about her, how anxious you are to see her do something. And Ronda Rousey was still beating Cruella up, which is fine, because we've established that Cruella is the, WWE representative under Adam Pearce and is somewhat heelish, has a problem with Naomi. That's fine, except now I've seen Cruella wrestle. She's got a great look, Brian. A wonderful personality. But that's it. Charlotte finally, she got on Ronda and got heat on her, but what is happening? Ronda's not a great worker with 2 hands. Naomi's an exciting girl, and in the mid card, I don't see, she was just in this because it was Cruella's issue for whatever reason. Charlotte didn't have a lot to do in this, but they got heat on Ronda, gave Naomi the comeback, and I was like, what the fuck? How? But then, no, wait. They stopped down and got heat on Naomi too. And then I wrote, why are they overstaying their welcome? Because this needed to be make the point and leave, right? But yes, they wanted to give a Ronda Rousey a comeback, and they should have. That's why I was wondering why they got heat on her first. That's because apparently somebody thought Naomi should have a comeback too. And I would have sacrificed that one for the good of the fucking game. But anyway, so finally, there was a horrible cold tag to Ronda. And Naomi just kind of got up and staggered and but nobody else was trying to stop her. And Ronda had to make a rotten one-armed comeback because it's all, and it was her, if I'm not mistaken, it was her right arm that was tied. And then finally, she gets an arm bar on Cruella anyway, still with the one arm. And Cruella obviously taps out, and Charlotte just says, fuck it, and walked out on it because she's mad that Cruella let her down. This was a waste of Charlotte and Ronda Rousey. And actually, not. It was a waste of Charlotte. It hurt Ronda Rousey because there's another thing that made her not only one of the girls, all the specials off, and now we've exposed her again that instead of letting her do what she does that all the people love, we're going to tie her arm and make her do some weird shit that she's definitely not experienced with. What'd you think?
I loved Ronda in the karate gi, and I'm certainly happy they didn't do the monster makeup, but I was okay with no makeup. The smiling, it's hard to say. I mean, she's so happy that you forget what a mean and nasty ass kicker she is sometimes. Charlotte looked like a star. I like Naomi.
I liked her better with the Flying Burrito Brothers.
Well, she wasn't with the Flying Burrito. You're thinking of Graham Parsons. But, it was fine for what it was. I mean, they don't know how to put together matches like this. If they had someone like you there who knew what to do with a bad gimmick that's been inserted into a match, perhaps they would be able to do something with it. But for what it was fine. And, another step towards WrestleMania.
But they're wearing concrete overshoes, which I guess is better than wearing one of those metal halos around your neck. And that's what old Mosh Pit Jones narrowly avoided in his match with Drew McIntyre. I am not going to lie. I have had people say that old Mosh Pit Jones is decent, but I'm not watching anything involving grown men named Happy or Madcap. However, after the fact, I did watch the clip of they call it an Alabama Slam because it's something kind of like what Bob Holly used to do, but it was different, and we'll illustrate how. But I can't explain to you unless he just lost track of where he was in the air. I don't understand how that happened, and I don't understand why that he was apparently termed fine, moments later after the match, whatever.
Especially if you're going to do that thing with Lashley later on, with concussion protocol.
Oh, yeah. Boy, I'll show you how to fucking protocol a concussion, motherfucker. I mean, Lashley kind of sunk down in a fucking heap, and they took him out in an ambulance. This guy was literally thrown with malice aforethought head first to a hard surface and fucking popped up and was Madcap just moments later.
He lives his gimmick.
It's because he has brain damage now. If anybody didn't watch this show, but they want to search the clip on Twitter, I guess I'm trying to relay the information to people about what this move was by Bob Holly. Used to do something he called the Alabama Slam. Imagine that you bend over, a guy's going to give you a pile driver. But instead of that guy picking you up and giving you a pile driver, you stand up under him and pick him up upside down. Now everybody kind of knows the position I'm talking about. And what Holly would do is Holly would then bend over and pull the guy's legs and snap him down to where he'd land flat of his back. Boom! In what they called an Alabama Slam, not to be confused with the Alabama Jam that Bobby Eaton did, which was the leg drop off top rope. So, I wasn't a fan of Bob Holly's Alabama Slam, and I'll tell you why. And to be honest, I don't know that I ever met any wrestler that was a fan of taking that move from Bob or anybody else. Not because they didn't know what they were doing, but just because it's not a great bump to take. The thing is that when you're just picked up and body slammed, or even, let's say, a vertical suplex where you land flat, right? And that's the idea, to spread the impact out, to land as flat as possible for your back, for your neck, and everything. And also, on just a regular body slam, gravity is the thing that's putting you down. And on even a vertical suplex, gravity is pretty much, unless, you get into the Dynamite Kid kind of, I'm going to fucking slam you as hard as possible. But it's gravity and you're landing flat. Well, this move, yes, it's still, you're landing flat, but there's a little bit more involved than gravity because you're not being picked up and dropped. You're being whipped over and then put down. And I'm not smart enough for all the terminology of the physics of the thing, Brian, but I think everybody's aware that when you crack a bullwhip, the reason why that the crack of the whip makes a noise, or you could crack any, why Bianca Belair with her hair, right, is because if you do it right, you get the fucking movement, the end of that long whip or that long ponytail or the whatever actually breaks the sound barrier or whatever. So when you're being whipped over, a guy's bending over and pulling your legs and whipping you over to plant you flat on the mat, your head is moving faster than the rest of you because your head is the end of that whip. And that's why even when guys tuck their head, you could get the back of your head is going to fucking bounce on that mat in a lot of cases when you take that bump. The back of your, or you're going to get whiplashed a little bit, or you're going to feel it. It's hard. It's a harder bump because of the momentum involved than just a regular body slam or a backdrop or whatever where gravity is doing its thing. And that's why a lot of guys didn't like taking it, and I don't blame them. Because flat back bumps, as we've mentioned before, who was it? Dr. Francois, I believe, is the one that came up with this formula. Every body slam or flat back bump that you take on the average wrestling ring is the equivalent of being in a car and getting rear-ended at 30 miles an hour. So then magnify that for something like this. Well, these two chuckle fucks, Drew McIntyre and Mosh Pit, they decided to change the formula on that Alabama Slam, and this time, instead of being jerked down flat of his back, old Mosh Pit he's turned around the other way, and when Drew pulled the legs and bent over, Mosh Pit is going face first toward the mat. You would think that would be easier because you're looking where you're going. And possibly, I don't know whether they've ever done this before. I've never seen it, that variety of it, that variation. But instead of, when McIntyre bent over and pulled the legs under, he starts going over forwards, and instead of just taking a splash bump, face first, kind of arms out, turn your head to the side, whatever, he tucked his head like he was going to be taking a bump the other way. And like I said, I know sometimes gymnasts get lost in the air on a revolution, or I don't know. I can't explain it because you would think you knew what the bump was going to be. It couldn't be anything that would require you to turn your head and duck forward. So I don't know why he would do it on purpose, unless he just lost where he was in the air, which can happen. But as a result, he's going over forwards, and he tucked his head down forward on top of that. And Brad, would you say he pretty much landed right straight with every bit of weight that you could land on top of his fucking head?
Right on top of his head. It looked bad.
And then they rolled him out and checked him, and he got up and said, "I'm good. I'm all right. Nothing to see. Just a flesh wound." And got back in and did whatever. So, miraculous. Oh, well, that was followed by a travelogue for Saudi Arabia where all the people were dancing and making merry and music was being played. No girls in bikinis. Didn't see any of that, though.
No, but they were having fun all just standing around, playing together, knowing that the cameras are filming them, and you must show happiness right now, or these sticks will be taken from you and you'll be beaten with them.
Yeah, and there was that one woman that was like looking at the camera and then looking to next to her and then looking next to her on the other side and looking back at the camera and blinking 3 times, making hand motions. I don't know what that was about. So the next match was more women. At least they weren't trying to break each other's necks like the men were. And I actually wanted to see this. Lita and Becky Lynch. because I want to, obviously I want to see how Lita, she still looks great. She was never Mildred Burke to begin with, but it seems like that she's kind of like me in that I started out looking just average, but I've maintained that look, whereas everybody's gone downhill. So just by coming back after all this time and being kind of similar to how she was before, she's ahead of everybody. What do you think?
Maybe. That's an interesting philosophy.
No, she looked happy, and she's the only one that really looked normal in all of the body covering gear, because that was kind of her gimmick anyway. The net shirt and the cool colors and the kerchief and the jeans and all that stuff. So she looked normal. Did Becky Lynch look smaller than normal in a bodysuit? Was it because it was black and black is slimming? That's why she turned sideways, stuck her tongue out, looked like a zipper?
I don't know if that was it, but I will say, and I don't know if I've said it on the air, but since she's returned, I have noticed she's appears to be skinnier than ever before.
Well, I mean, I'm sure she has great cardio, but it just the bodysuit, it looked different. But still, Becky Lynch is a full-fledged heel. And she works like a heel, and she's got aggression to her style and her body language and everything. Lita worked hard, didn't seem to have lost too much for being off, as long as she has. And I guess they have exhausted most of the people. I don't keep track of a lot of the girls, but they've exhausted most of the people from that era, the guys that can come back, and it's new and it's fresh. This was new, right? Because she hadn't been back. Becky Lynch again with the facials, heel facials, just projecting a little bit. Heat on Lita. Lita made a big comeback. Crossbody off the ropes, 2 count. And then did you see where Becky Lynch did the roll up near the ropes where she was going to grab the ropes, right? And I guess the idea was the referee would not see she's holding onto the ropes, but when Lita kicked out, she landed in front of Lita so Lita could grab the sleeper on her from behind, right? Did you see she forgot to put out how to put the sleeper on for a second?
Yeah, I did see that.
And then I was like, oh shit, because she had both of her arms over the top of Becky's head and neither one around her throat. And I was like, shit. And then she realized. Several false finishes. The one spot where Lita got her foot on the ropes on a false finish, and Becky Lynch had what apparently was a combination nervous breakdown and had seen a literal ghost. Her dead grandmother reappeared in the ring in front of her. The overselling of how could this happen? A little much. But then I liked the match because, like I said, Lita's an over babyface. Becky Lynch, she's an over girl, whether she's a heel or a babyface. But the finish, Lita hit her moonsault, which everybody wanted to see. That's one of the things that she used to do. And it was great that she got a 2 count and then kick out because, okay, Becky Lynch is a main eventer, right? We've seen Lita's moonsault. She almost got the win. So let's now go to the finish, but not this quickly. Literally, Becky Lynch is dead. Lita pulls her to her feet, and Becky Lynch instantly just grabs her and gives her a rock bottom. Boom, 1, 2, 3. What the fuck? Who's doing these finishes? It was like 10 seconds after the fucking moonsault. And then there was again, I could understand Becky Lynch beating Lita clean without cheating because Lita's just a guest star. She's not sticking around, I guess, although considering Dude Drop and everybody else is on the roster, they ought to make her an offer. But you don't have to beat her not only clean, but flat and out of nowhere and in a situation where it doesn't make sense because you're doing a move where you just got moonsaulted and barely kicked out 10 seconds beforehand. Your thoughts, Brian?
I actually missed this match. It was this match and the Madcap Moss match that I got up and I said, this is the middle of my day, and I've been sitting here for a while now. I saw some of the highlights. I'm not a big Lita fan, so I wasn't, nothing against her, but I wasn't like really looking forward to seeing this match. So I did not see the match. I can't really judge it.
Well, in that case, then just agree with everything I said. That's a safe bet every time.
I agree. Well, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I agree with what you say. And, one of the things you've been saying is, Brian, exercise more. Exercise is really important.
Is that what you did? You got up and went to exercise?
That's why I missed the match. I was downstairs in the gym working out.
Have you got your gym all set up at New Last Manor?
Not all set up, partially set up. There's still, I got to get a whole new weight rack. I got to get new mirrors and a whole bunch of things, but partially
furnace, all those types of
furnace
things.
in the weight room. That's right.
Yeah, and you're going to have one of those swimming pools built too there where you can just swim against the tide. Because I like to go against the grain. But folks, if you have been working too hard and not working out enough, if you can't just bop into your home gym like Mr. Last can there and make all the equipment available to yourself to have a fine workout, you need to stay in shape. And you need an affordable way to not only get the equipment, but the community and the instruction that you so richly deserve. So, our fine friends at Echelon, folks, will help you out. Echelon is the affordable way to get the workout equipment, the workout community, and an instructor's motivation. And we've been talking about how motivating those instructors can be. Wink, wink, nod, nod. Boy, I'll tell you what, some of them can be hard on the beaver. Old Ward, as he would say.
What?
But, what?
Of all the examples for you to use, okay, go ahead.
Well, I'm just saying, every time that Beaver would come home and he had misbehaved, old Ward Cleaver would be hard on the Beaver, and then June would say, Ward, you've been hard on the Beaver, but it's for his own good. And that's why some of these instructors, if they tell you what to do and they potentially come to your house, knock on the door with a stick or a boot or something and threaten to stick it up your ass or beat you about the head and face with it until you get your work done, well, you better acknowledge them. Acknowledge them. Echelon Fitness's fitness app provides you thousands of live and on-demand classes with great music from your favorite artists like the Strawberry Alarm Clock and the Troglodytes. With Echelon Fitness, you can work out anytime, day or night, and crush your fitness goals. Absolutely demolish them, powderize them. And then you can scream at the top of your lungs, I'm the king of the world! Just pick your class, climb the leaderboard, cheer each other on, give it your all, folks. Echelon Fitness lets you determine the amount of interaction you have and the amount of pillaging and wandering around the neighborhood you might be doing. These fitness instructors are supportive, engaging, and fun, and the full range of affordable workout equipment, including stationary bikes, smart rowers, sleek fitness screens, and, of course, the ever-popular and formerly dangerous but now under control auto-folding treadmill. All of them are connected to provide the Echelon Fitness experience with around-the-clock classes for the family, full-body workout programs that'll keep you coming back, and one membership covering a family of 5. Folks, can you imagine the whole family working out at the same time? Talk about togetherness.
That's
when you
right.
can sweat and strain and shit your pants together, you'll stay together. And right now, for a limited time only, folks, podcast listeners of mine, not anyone else's, but just mine, get up to $840 off the MSRP on some of these fine pieces of equipment. To get this exclusive discount, text DRIVE, D-R-I-V-E, to 818181. Text DRIVE to 818181 for up to $840 off the MSRP. Message and data rates may apply. Terms available at echelonfit.com/SMS. Membership sold separately. 818181.
Well, Jim, let's get away from that neighborhood disturbance and let's get back to a neighborhood threat, the WWE in Saudi Arabia.
Well, there was a big tag team match. Did you blink? Brian, you might have missed it if you blinked. Or is it blunk? Blanked?
I've never heard blunk. I think it would be blinked.
Well, if you blinked, you missed. It was supposed to be the Usos and the Viking Raiders, but for once, they had pity on us, and this show was only 3 hours long. I guess they were running long, and the Usos jumped the Viking Raiders at ringside at the entrance and beat them up and left. And that was that. But it wasn't like an ambulance job or anything. The Viking Raiders were there rubbing their heads like, well, that hurt. And that was kind of that.
What do you mean?
Were they running late? What?
Yeah, what do you mean we don't have a match? We're fine. We can do it.
But then came the Elimination Chamber the second time. We've already seen this, so at least we kind of know the rules now and the way things are going to play out. They've given us a preview earlier. This was Lashley versus Rollins versus AJ Styles versus Riddle versus Theory versus Brock Lesnar. And what? I'm sorry?
I'm saying it was a very well-timed turn of your page there.
Yes. I'd like to turn the page on this whole chapter, but I'd like to think going into this, my God, this is such a dangerous match. But a 95-pound girl just came in second without even bleeding or messing her makeup up. So I'm thinking it may be okay here. Except the one guy that got injured actually went into the thing hurt. Also, does it take away some of the danger and aura of violence of these matches now that they've got a budget, that everything's so clean and so brand new and so spotless? It doesn't. The War Games, when they set that cage up in the fucking Omni, right? That awesome shit could go down here. Some chain link fence and a goddamn wrestling ring with a bloodstained mat. Good times. Now you could eat off this shit. People's homes aren't as clean as this. When they have garbage matches, they buy new toolboxes to have it to roll in the ring and hit each other with. Anyway, so Theory and Seth Rollins started out, and again, nice wrestling action in the middle of all this gimmick. They're both smooth, they're timing, they're on point, they're precise. You know, their shit looks just fine, right? And then Seth picks Theory up on the ring is surrounded by a platform, and then the chain of the Elimination Chamber and the plexiglass pods at the corners. Seth Rollins picks Theory up and buckle bombs him into the plexiglass on Lashley's pod, which breaks, and he goes into Lashley, and Lashley just kind of sinks to the ground and is unconscious. And we find out later on, because then I was like, well, that's kind of pissy. And the doctors are starting to check on him while the match is going on. Apparently, Brian, did you hear that he had a pre-existing shoulder injury from the Royal Rumble and couldn't do anything, and this was the way of getting him out of the match, as well as, thankfully, he didn't get beat, but he still lost the title. But remember when I said when Brock was giving him all those German suplexes, I said as it went on, it looked like Bobby was tired of going over backwards on his head and started going sideways, landing on his shoulder?
Yeah.
Apparently, that wasn't a good thing to do either. So Lashley is taken out of this thing, and people are like, what the fuck? And again, I know he's hurt and they didn't want to risk anything, but multiple times on this show, somebody had already taken some maneuver, what a maneuver, that was more devastating looking than poor Bobby just slinks down and, there we go. But it is what it is.
So they put the belt on him when he was already hurt at the Rumble?
No, well, no, wait. Because he was hurt in that match. So that's where he won the belt.
Yeah.
Well, you don't know that you're always hurting. You wouldn't know you were hurt until you came out.
But if the idea, you have to think the idea was to get title versus title at WrestleMania, right? Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar. And if that's the case, you would think Brock Lesnar was going to win the Elimination Chamber one way or the other.
Yes.
Was it worth it to put the belt on Bobby Lashley for a month?
Yes, if he hadn't have got hurt. I'm not arguing with the way, I'm sure whatever they originally intended for this would have had Lashley coming out better than he looked when he just, took a dive in the pod. But I wouldn't have, they didn't know he was hurt in the match where he won the title back at Rumble. And then they went on with the plans that they were going to fucking do until they found out he couldn't wrestle now. Don't you see?
I see. I still question, even if he didn't get hurt, if you put the belt on him for a month, just to have Lesnar win the belt back at Elimination Chamber?
Well, hey, then in that case, call up Bruce. Don't argue with me. You try arguing with Bruce. I've tried it too many times over the past. But next in was the bro himself, Matt Riddle, and he did stuff. I know for whatever reason, because people who like that kind of thing, that's the kind of thing those people like. I know he's a legitimate athlete, but with the foolishness compounded by WWE booking, does anybody take him seriously as a top guy that's going to win the championship, or just he's the gimmick, it's going to be the odd couple partner with Orton or do whatever?
I couldn't wait to see Brock throw him, though.
Well, it didn't last long, did it? AJ came in next. AJ Styles did all kinds of shit. But at this point, it was like they were killing time. And then finally, Riddle went on a flurry where he laid everybody out. And so the only person left to come in the match is Brock, right? But when the timer counts down and beep, it's Lashley's pod that opens, because it was his turn if he'd have still been there, right? Theoretically. So everybody kind of goes, ooh, and I guess they were going to do something. And this is out, and I can believe it. And I'll tell you the reason in a second why I believe it. Brock just said, fuck it, and felt the people and broke out of his pod in the non-gimmicked plexiglass and came in and started kicking the shit out of everybody. Apparently, and that's been reported, he went into business for himself. And I've got to think that actually is probably the best thing that could have been done at that spot, because it was an awkward, what the fuck? But the reason I know why it wasn't planned is because they didn't shoot it. And if they would have been there and ready and on top of it, if that was a planned spot, and if the TV crew from the director on down had known it was going to happen, they'd have got a great. But you just saw barely in the back of the screen, Brock kicked that thing out, and you heard the announcers talk about it, and he came. But that's an example of a guy like Brock. All the main event guys used to feel this way in the territory days. If something came up and it's there, I'm going to do it. If the booker yells at me, I'm going to apologize later on. But that's how, that memorable moments are created, because you don't plan a lot of them. But nobody but Brock has the leeway or the balls or the I don't give a shit that all the main event guys used to have in the whole business to do his own shit. Of course, back then, most of the time, 85% of the time, the business that the main event guys went into on their own was better than what was planned. Now it would probably be reverse of that. So Brock is in the ring, and boom, big comeback. F5 on Rollins, 1, 2, 3. F5 on Riddle, 1, 2, 3. F5 on AJ, 1, 2, 3. And then Austin Theory is like, fuck. And he did a great job selling this with the facials and I don't know what to do. And he's trying to run. He's trying to climb. Actually, Theory got the big ball shot first. And Brock sold it big so that Theory could fucking get a 2 count on him. I think with a DDT or whatever. Now Brock was mad. So Theory climbs. And did you see Austin Theory's 23, 24 years old, and he's in great physical condition. He climbs that cage, and then Brock comes out and had climbed 25 feet in 5 seconds. Did you see that big fucking beastly goof go up that thing? Like a monkey.
He really is like a caged animal. If you let him loose, he'll just fly at you. Yeah.
Yes. And that's why he's over. But he was up climbing not a cage, but a cage made out of chain. He was at the top of that thing in 5 seconds. And they get on top of the pod, and he F5s Theory off. Thank God he got his feet underneath him, onto the stage by the side of the ring, and enrolled him in, and boom, and 1, 2, 3, and there you go. And again, that's how you get over or stay over. The problem is the talent has to do their part by being the uncaged beast or whatever. And they could do this with some other guys, but it wouldn't be Brock. And Roman Reigns, they've done it. They've given him a massive push, and it's worked out for him. A lot of these other guys have neither got the push nor, to be honest, have the aura where the push would take to the level that it has with these guys, because you can, when Brock is doing some shit like that and just it's chaos, you can hearken back to the days of Austin or The Rock or Foley or whoever, creating that kind of impression on you. And nobody else does that lately, which is why they're in the pickle that they're in about bringing back the Over the Hill Gang for every big pay-per-view and super show and premium live event in Saudi Arabia. What'd you think of that chamber match?
I thought it was all right. I enjoyed the spectacle of it just because I enjoy seeing Brock getting more into Austin Theory every time we see him work in the ring as opposed to the backstage segments. I was intrigued by the whole Lashley thing. Interesting way of selling. I'll say that. But,
I mean, you couldn't take a bump in there. What was he supposed to do? I understand there's okay, this will be a great visual, and Bobby doesn't have to take a bump and hurt himself, but how was he supposed to sell that? I don't know. Go ahead.
Well, speaking of bumps, I was kind of uncomfortable with that big Austin Theory bump. Jeez, I mean, he could have gotten hurt pretty badly, but he's been great in everything we've seen him in, and the right guy won the match. I questioned the booking, having him lose the belt a month ago to win it back now just to get to WrestleMania's title versus title. Does the match or anything you saw in the match change or cement your opinions about what they see in Austin Theory there, if you had to guess?
No, because, I mean, nobody had the chance to really do, do anything completely memorable besides maybe Brock fucking kicking out of the goddamn pod in this thing. But at the same time, everything Theory does, he does well. And at least they let him, instead of just getting beaten flat like almost everybody else did when Brock came in and went on the rampage, they let it be a memorable moment and him, last and do some things at the end. But no, everything except for the pre-tapes or the backstage stuff or whatever with Vince McMahon. And for obvious reasons, he's not going to do anything except say, yes, sir, on that, Austin Theory. Everything I see Theory do is impeccable for what it needs to be.
Well, that was the WWE in Saudi Arabia. And I guess one other question I'll ask you about this before we get to anything else you saw. How do you think Cody Rhodes fits into this world?
Oh, boy. I bet we talked at length about this the other day. But just with a little bit more reflection and time to think about this, I have heard supposedly somebody said that they have an idea for Cody. And if it's an idea like that, it's probably coming from Vince. And if that's the case, then he's going to try whatever this is to get it over to the best of his ability, because Vince does not like to give up on his own ideas. He's almost got to be a heel, does he not? Almost has to.
He should be, and maybe now that he's not doing the community outreach stuff for AEW, he'll be a little more interested in doing it. I mean,
anti-community?
He'll be a little more anti-community now. What a great gimmick that would be.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, the anti-community outreach leader. That's right. We want you to stay the fuck away from us. He's going to almost have to be a heel. But at the same time, I really still think they are purchasing what Cody is rather than who he is. They're purchasing the knowledge that he has about the inner workings of the company. And somebody said, when we said this the other day, somebody on Twitter said, well, Cody, a lot of those guys don't like Cody, so they're not going to do what he asks them to. I didn't say that. I said whether they like Cody, they don't like Cody, or they don't care if Cody drops dead and catches on fire, he knows how to get a hold of everybody, what their deals are, when they're up, what their personal picadillos and desires are, how best to entice them to do something, whether it's him doing it or whether it's just him telling somebody else in the WWE that might be closer to these people personally, or that might just contact them out of the blue whenever they are legally available to do that, right? It's knowledge. Also, he's an EVP of this company. He knows a lot of the things that happened. He's obviously either not happy with the way that he was being utilized in terms of his potential booking genius or whatever, or the thing he was hung up on was, I want as much money as CM Punk because I set myself on fire for you.
No one asked him to. That was a. By the way, he set himself on fire after having a match where he had that flame retardant stuff on his back the whole match to end a blood feud that never was with Andrade. There was no reason for it, and Brandy started the fire.
She didn't start the fire, but it's still burning because he wasn't earning as much as Punk was earning.
Very good.
Okay, all right. Hey, wait a minute. Hold on here.
Let's get some applause. Wow, what a happy audience.
Because he still was burning because he wasn't earning. What I'm trying to say is they've got knowledge. They've also got a high-profile main event guy from the other side. They're not going to bring him in and job him to the moon.
Well, let me stop you there. When was the last time Cody had a main event? He wasn't in the main event mix with any of those guys there for a lot since before the pandemic, you could argue.
But also he came in and did his little high profile stuff. He was the one with Shaq. He was the one with the fucking big cage. He was the one with the fucking flaming blah, blah, blah. You can't deny that Cody has been inextricably linked with AEW since the start. He's a high-profile guy, even if he isn't a main event star right now. He's a high-profile guy from the other side. They got that. They've got a guy that can wrestle and can do their style. So, and they've got a little snickering right. So, yeah, I'm sure they spent some money on it. But again, Tony Khan had to decide whether he was going to, cave in to the demands and pay Cody that much money, because then what's going to happen when old Twinkle Toes' deal is up next year? Well, he certainly, because he's the world's greatest wrestling artist, he would think he was worth as much as Cody. And then it would start with the Hardley Boys and on down the line. So now Tony has shown that if you just ask for more than you're worth and that I can possibly give you and justify it, you're going to go no matter who you are. So actually, maybe Tony came out the better on this.
I think Tony did the only thing he could do here, but the other thing to look at, whether we like him or not, the Bucks, Tony seems to be okay with allowing them. Tony's thing for them was basically, look, I'm going to have this promotion. You guys can have a few segments. Do your thing. Everyone talks about the Codyverse, the Bucks universe. I mean, those segments exist in their own universe. He's okay with that. Omega, whether it's working with the women's division or the video game, we haven't heard any complaints from Tony. Seems to be okay with that. This wasn't just money. This was also, listen, you are horrible at booking. I'm Tony Khan, and I'm telling you don't know what you're doing right now, and I'm not going to give you free reign anymore. And Cody couldn't take it.
I can't argue with you. But we will see what the unveiling in the WWE brings us. And I don't see any reason, with the built-in animosity he has from any crossover AEW fans who watch the WWE program, the fact that when he was last in the WWE, Cody, he was a heel to begin with. The fact that he seems to have a talent for making the fans dislike him, even if he's trying not to utilize it at the time, I think he can be a top-level heel, or will be a top-level heel in the WWE. I'm not talking about he's not going to go out and beat Roman Reigns. We mentioned There's going to be a level somewhere where Vince is not going to be able to say this guy that was just on this outlaw opposition TV just a few months ago is not going to come in and beat Bobby Lashley or whatever the fuck. But he can probably beat somebody the level of Owens, who just got a couple $1 million, right? So he'll be, I would think, a heel and probably an upper level heel, and we'll see what happens.
But the thing is, you have a great opportunity when he first gets there if they don't blow it, because they do need more guys at the top of the card. Whether you think Cody is that or not, I know what you think, but I'm talking about to the general audience.
Yeah.
Whether you think Cody is that or not, him coming in right now is the opportunity to push him like that and try to make it work. We've seen Roman Reigns face-to-face with every single guy on that roster. Could say the same thing about Brock Lesnar, same thing about Bobby Lashley, various guys. Same thing about Randy Orton. Throwing Cody into that mix does give you guys, if you don't fuck it up, it gives you the chance to do something different for once.
Yes. And sometimes different alone is better because it's different. It's not the same. It's different than the same, which is why it's different.
I wish they would give him free reign on promos. I want more of that ladder match promo. That ladder match promo is such a piece of art. When you're watching something, and you can go back and watch that promo now, and watch it knowing that as soon as he started talking, every single person in the back that was watching it started cringing, and some got really mad. It's one of the most amazing and funny promos in the history of wrestling. And it's the last promo Cody ever did in AEW. And I hope they give him free reign, because I don't think you could script, honestly, whether you like him or not, scripting Cody right now kind of defeats the purpose.
Yeah, it's just like, what is going to come out of his mind? And how are people going to take it? And it would save Vince money. He wouldn't have to hire 4 different writers for that segment. He could just, Cody, go out and speak to the people. To the people.
Well, whether it's by foot, by air, or perhaps by car, some may say by auto, I'm sure Cody will be going to WWE very, very soon, and perhaps he needs some help with his auto, some auto parts.
Well, he's got that bus. I wonder, does he have to give the bus back? Who paid for the bus? Did Tony Khan buy the Nightmare coach, or was it Cody and Brandy out of Nightmare Incorporated?
Here's a question for you. Is our long American nightmare over? Will he be allowed to call himself the American Nightmare ever again?
Well, I think even if he doesn't call himself that, I think he'll be giving Americans nightmares for many years to come. And on that bus, if he's going to be taking Brandy and the baby that brought an end to racism and the whole Nightmare Clan, Arn with the Waffle House menu and QT and all of the students and everybody, he's going to need to keep that bus in tip-top condition. And folks, if you've ever been coast to coast and continent to continent in a traveling Nightmare family tour bus, you'll know there's so many things that can go wrong. Your thermostat can go out. The bolt that goes through to hold the tire onto the snabits, it can fucking fling off on the interstate, and you can go into a ditch at 90 miles an hour. Well, folks, if you want to do your maintenance, whether it's on the Nightmare bus or whether it's just on your current car that you own for your own family, you need to protect them by doing your maintenance, and you need to get the parts and the equipment at rockauto.com. Because, of course, there's all kinds of makes and models of cars. There's Fiats, and there's Kias, and there's models like the Pacificas and the XT5s and the Cadillac LaSalles. It's impossible to stock all the parts that you need in one of these traditional chain storefronts. And then you have to endure pointless and intimidating questioning from the fat, pimply-faced fellow behind the counter. Well, is it an LX or an EX or whatever? And he's going to give you the part he wants to give you. Folks, if you go to rockauto.com, you can get a part for every dadgum car. You can find parts for DeLoreans. You can as a matter of fact, if you're really good with your hands, you can build a DeLorean from scratch with parts you find on rockauto.com. That's what I've heard.
I can't utterly dismiss that. Is, I guess, maybe a possibility, actually.
You could get close. You could have something that'll ride you down to the store at least. Anyway, at rockauto.com, You're going to save money to use for frivolous things like mortgage or food. You can save 30, 50% on the same auto parts that you would get at a chain store at rockauto.com. You could even save 100%. Actually, you can save 100% at the chain store over rockauto.com, because if you go to the chain store and you shoplift, you could steal it. It would cost you no money. And rockauto.com is going to charge you some money. But rockauto.com is the cheapest place that you can go to actually buy something rather than steal it. It's a family business. They've been serving auto parts customers online for 20 years. So all you got to do is go to rockauto.com. And if you write in there, "How did you hear about us?" box, JCE, then they'll know that we sent you. They won't give you a discount, not because they're cheap bastards, but because they can't cut these prices any lower. They'd be paying you to take this shit. And then what are you going to do with 3 manifolds? Folks, amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com.
That's right. And speaking of Rock Auto, this has nothing to do with Rock Auto. I guess we drove through the WWE, but let's take a step back. Let's go in reverse. Back to Friday.
Let's stop at the pissy rest area that smells like urine.
Called Rampage on Friday nights.
Yes, on Friday. I wanted to watch this program real briefly, and that's how I watched it. Because not only was this Jay White making his wrestling debut on the program, and everybody's been raving about this guy, but also found out old Willie Hobbs, Powerhouse Hobbs, was wrestling on the program. So I thought, I got to watch this, right? So I have a few brief impressions. The first match was the Incredible Shrinking Cole, and here comes Adam, does the entrance, people are with it. I'm like, okay, let's see. And here comes a member of the Dork Order. Remember number 10? Number 10 that beat up all the security guards in that phony setup deal Wednesday night?
That made me laugh so hard. He was just throwing them all around as they ran at him one at a time.
Yes, they ran at him one at a time like you always do when trying to take down a large adversary. There's 10 of you, so you run one at a time. So this guy, he wears a mask, and he has 10 in Roman numerals written in Sharpie on his chest. These numbers have never been significant. We have never been told the number. They've got 3 or 4 people that are numbered, but we don't know why. It goes back to the original Dork Order thing that was supposed to be the cult or whatever. They called this guy by his name, Preston Vance, but yet he still wears a mask, and he's introduced as 10, but we acknowledge who he is. And he's a big, good-looking athlete. Well, I don't know what his face looks like. His face may look like 30 miles of bad road, may look like a dog that's been chasing parked cars because he's got a mask on. But he's got a big body, got some height to him. As a matter of fact, he made Adam Cole look even smaller. But between the fact that here's a guy that's obviously an indiscriminate job guy, underneath fellow, bad gimmick, unprofessional looking, with nothing explained about his presence besides this is the group that Tony Khan likes for whatever reason. He makes Adam Cole look small in the ring, and then he ragdolled Adam Cole quite a bit. Has Adam Cole had a major singles victory in AEW yet?
Oh, I'm not sure, but I think he's the number 1 contender.
Well, yes, but he got beat by the mascot with a phony move in a garbage match.
That was lights out. That was a lights out match.
Yeah, but we saw it. Unfortunately, the lights were still on in the arena, and we saw it. And then he's had 1 or 2 wins over, I think he beat Pizzeria Uno last week or whatever. So now, at one point in this match, and I'm not going to talk about it any longer, Cole gets heat on number 10's leg, right? I feel like this is the old Patrick McGowan series, The Prisoner. Number 10, number 3. He gets heat on number 10's leg. He unhooks the knee brace on number 10's bad knee, and he's given all kinds of abuse. And then in the middle of the heat, number 10 picks Adam Cole up in a vertical suplex and holds him up in a delayed position for like 20 or 30 seconds. Holding a 175-pound man over his head, standing there perfectly. Boom, gives him the suplex, goes back to selling the leg. So it took Adam Cole 10 minutes to beat number 10. And the rating on the match was number 2. So again, they're doing this poor fella no favors. But Will Hobbs was against Dante Martin, and this was bittersweet, Brian. Oh, Powerhouse Hobbs against Dante Martin, because we've been wanting to see Powerhouse Hobbs wrestle. We'd like to see him wrestle more often so that he can get over and be a star. But this was a qualifying match for the King of the Revolution ladder match. In other words, they're having these matches on all these shows where the winners are all going to get to be in a 6-man ladder match clusterfuck. And now, the first 3 people in this ladder match, Brian, are Wardlow, Keith Lee, and Powerhouse Hobbs in a fucking multiple-man ladder match, all of them together. Why not the paraplegic high jump? Why not put these guys in the single most derogatory kind of match to accentuate their weaknesses and negate their strengths than to have the biggest, strongest, fucking most impressive looking grown men in the company all trying to climb a fucking ladder?
That's why I thought Dante Martin was going to win, which I was kind of upset about. Even though I like Dante Martin, I'm like, man, Powerhouse Hobbs does not need to lose again. But they can't be putting the 3 biggest guys they have in the ladder match. Dante Martin's a perfect fit. You think he's going to do some high impact stuff, but no, that's exactly what they did. I was surprised.
I explained this syndrome a few weeks ago on one of the shows, but I'll do it again. This is Mark booking, because from a, and I even, not even the word fan, the word Mark, from when you've gone past fan and you're submerged into Mark, this would be, let's put the biggest guys in a ladder match. Just that thought without any deeper introspection. Oh, that'd be great. But then these people are not the people that have to have the match. The guy, the booker, the amateur booker, is not the one that has to get in there and do that shit. And even if they're excited about it because they think they can and it'll be fun, as we've seen, most of these guys do not know how to stay away from the ways that they should not be presented on television. So, in this match, Dante tried to look mean on his entrance, and I swear to God, Dante Martin trying to look mean facially looks like somebody after they had a Taco Bell blowout. They're on the interstate in their car trying to get to the next rest area before they shit themselves. I recognize that facial expression. So Hobbs jump-started it, and they started off at 100 miles an hour. And it got sloppy because they were going too fast, too quick. And then Hobbs knocked Martin off the top rope and then off the apron to the floor for another big bump and slowed it down, thank God, before they lost hold of it completely. But the start was not doing either guy any favors because they were trying to do a bunch of shit where Dante was flurrying and whatever. It was too fast, and they didn't let their feet get under them. There's no veteran here in this match. There's 2 green guys on national TV, but when Hobbs is in control, the pace is good because he's been taught and told, slow down. Let's see your facials. Let your moves count. Let them register. Now they've got a Beal contest. Who can do the biggest Beal? Keith Lee shot-putted Isaiah Cassidy last week, so now Hobbs tries to, and I believe that he did 2, and the second one was even bigger. I believe that they may have beat the Keith Lee, Isaiah Cassidy Beal, but when you can do a flying Beal for a break spot, it's pretty good Beal. And that's what they did.
Is that really the qualifying move to get into the ladder match? Who can Beal someone the furthest?
Yeah. You know what? They ought to draw rings around the ring. And so, okay, and like if you can get past into the fucking bonus anyway. So they come back from the break, and old Powerhouse has a bear hug on him, and he's ragdolling him, and Dante's fighting back from underneath. And if anybody still has this on their VTR, they want to go back and look at it. Here's the thing. Dante is green, and he has an amazing athletic gift in terms of his, not only his balance and agility, but his extraordinary leaping ability. He gets more height. He's a jumper, no doubt about it. But because of that, a lot of people are forgetting, or possibly even trying to overlook, that he's still green and he's still young. And when he was fighting back from underneath, he was rushing everything, so nothing looked good. At one point, he was trying to flurry with Hobbs, and did you see, like, the kick, a couple of punches, the strikes are not looking good, and then the uppercut forearm that's more like a, wow, I missed type of thing. He's trying to follow through with it, but it didn't look like there was any impact. He's got to slow down. He looks nervous to me. I don't know if this is the case, but it looks like it. He needs to slow down, make less look better and mean more. Stop doing the stuff that he can't do well. That, again, that uppercut forearm, if you look at the one he did right before he ran and hit the ropes, there was no impact. It was all swoosh and follow through and no actual. They're trying to make him look pretty without actually getting the fucking meat of the matter down. But then Hobbs would take it back. So when Hobbs was in control, it was fine. Hobbs has the facials. Hobbs has the attitude. Hobbs looks like he's more relaxed now. Hobbs is ready to go. Dante Martin is not. It's not saying he's not ever going to be. He's got a lot of potential and an amazing athletic gift you can't teach.
And he is young.
And he's young. But the more the people see him now in the greenness and the herky-jerky and the rushing and the, just horrible physique. And I know somebody said,
not horrible.
It's horrible because it's not there. He looks, go back and look at, and somebody, I was about to say, I was going to say, Cornette, you're one to talk. Go back and look at Randy Orton in his first match in OVW. Somebody tweeted that here a while back. He didn't look very good at all. He still looked better than Dante Martin. He was 19 years old too. Put some weight on, tan somehow, just work at, do a different gear or something. That's the point. He needs time. He doesn't need to be on national television. You're going to spoil a good thing. In a couple of years, when he's gained weight and he's worked out and he's got better basics because he's not working with these fucking other clowns that don't know anything either on TV every week. He's working in a fucking school somewhere where hopefully somebody can take a special interest in him. Then you'd have something. But Dante Martin is not ready right now to be on national TV, except for the jumping. And he's never going to be accepted as somebody that deserves to be there if they keep seeing him before he can fucking get his shit together. But having said that, his comeback was so-so, but then he did a big corkscrew dive off the top to the floor, and the people, ah! But if the only way that he can get people is with the big leaps and jumps and dives, he's going to have a short career. Case in point, he didn't know how to fire up from underneath. He can't fucking strike and kick to save his life, but he hit a missile drop kick off the top rope where he had to be. At one point, his head was 20 feet off the mat. And he drop kicked Hobbs and took a flat back bump off of that. The drop kick wasn't anything. I'd have taken the drop kick, but I wouldn't have wanted to take the goddamn flat back bump after I gave it. He jumped off the top rope, went 20 feet in the air and took a flat back bump. And that was just a high spot for a 2 count. A missile drop kick where the guy goes 20 feet in the air, if you milked that all match long and finally hit it and it was a finish, it would tear the house down. But he just used it here, like, I'll get a 2 count, and then we're going to the finish where Dante hit 6 in a row, horrible forearms. Again, everybody is looking at the guy. He can jump, but he can do the crossbody, and he can do spring up to the top, and he can't hit a forearm that looks like a grown adult man's because he's green and he's inexperienced, and everybody's concentrating on putting him over for the natural ability that he has instead of calming him down and saying, before you do all that, you need to learn how to do this first. Then that will mean something, and don't do as much of that, because less of that will mean more and get you over more when you do know how to do this. And when you do less of that, then you will be able to walk at an older age to continue to do this and make money for a longer period of time. Does that make sense?
I think so. I was a little uncomfortable with the missile dropkick spot off the rope just because of just landing on your... Just the way the landing of that is a hard... I mean, that was one of the things that hurt Bryan Danielson for a long time. And he's still doing it, actually, too, now that I think about it.
Well, but he ain't doing it from that high in the air.
No.
And then, again, just out of nowhere, Martin hit those 6 rotten forearms, and Hobbs, it just looked like Hobbs said, fuck it, let's do it. Boom. A great spine buster, completely out of nowhere and apropos of nothing. Boom, 1, 2, 3. So the heel beats the babyface flat again. And again, I don't have a problem. Hobbs shouldn't have to cheat at this stage of his life to beat Dante Martin at this stage of his life. Couldn't you build to it? Just, okay, you've done all your shit. Now I'm just going to grab you and hit my finish. Boom. There you go. I mean, it used to, the finish, when the 1, 2, 3 finally came in most matches, anything but just a flat out squash, you're like, wow, I didn't expect that right there. But now it's like, wow, I didn't expect that all of a sudden. It's just flat.
So in this latter match, we're going to get to finally see Keith Lee interact with Wardlow and Keith Lee interact with Powerhouse Hobbs.
Finally.
Who else are we missing? What other big guy needs to be in this match? The Bear team, the Bear Bronson and Bear Friend, or whatever they are.
Bear Friend.
I don't remember what they are.
They're barely there. That's the thing. Finally get to see. Keith Lee's been there for a week and a half. Hobbs has been there for a while, but we haven't seen enough of him on television. Wardlow's been there forever, but the last thing you want to do is interact Wardlow with Keith Lee and Powerhouse Hobbs, because then that negates Wardlow's main strength at this point, which is he's big. I don't know. Maybe we can bring back the McGuire twins and put them. They could be the lad, and then Happy Humphrey with his manager Harley Race with a garden hose. Boy, the older fans are just dying laughing over this show today. But anyway, Willie Hobbs is ready to go, and Dante Martin is a talented long-term project that is unfortunately being asked to get experience on live national television.
No fault of his own.
No, it's not his fault. It's mismanagement. Can you imagine if they kept that guy somewhere? I don't know what the Nightmare Factory is doing these days. In the old days, it'd been OVW. He would have been at a church gym on Tuesday, and he'd have been at the, fucking amusement park every other Friday. And in front of a few hundred people, he would be able to practice and modify and be critiqued and instructed. And he'd get the basics, because I'd love to blurt out 15 wrestling schools right now that I think he could get good instruction at, but I don't know any. So I don't know what they're teaching anymore.
And obviously there's one associated directly with AEW, which is QT Marshall's gym.
Oh, well, that's the Nightmare Factory, right?
Right.
Well, they may get a name change. I don't know. But
that's a good point.
But, once again, what are they teaching if the guy can do a shooting star press flawlessly and can't throw a forearm? What are they fucking teaching?
Not far from, not that it's the closest, but not far from Atlanta, not far from QT's gym, you got Tom Pritchard over there. He learned a whole
Well, there
different
you
style.
go.
Les Thatcher's still around.
Well, Les is not teaching an ongoing program right now, but Les...
but if you go to Tom's gym, you know what? Les is the kind of guy that could drop by. And
he drops by.
Yeah.
And that's the JPWA, the Jacobs Pritchard Wrestling Academy. Well, as a matter of fact, I've talked to Tom, just to bullshit with Tom over the last several months. He'll say, boy, you ought to see the look on the guy's face when they come in and they want to learn imagine you went to basketball camp to train with a famous basketball professional for a career in basketball, and all the students, they want to know how to learn the three-point shot and how to dunk, but they hate dribbling, and goddamn that ball passing is just, well, why are we learning this? A lot of guys want to go to wrestling school these days. Well, can't we do the moves we see on television? Yeah, you can do the moves in the Olympics you see on television too, but not after you figure out how to get on the court. You know,
that's one of the guys I'd go after if I was AEW. I hate to say it, not to tear down that wrestling school, but I'd go after a Tom Pritchard. I want you to just work with our young wrestlers nonstop.
Of course you would, since not only was Tom the head trainer for WWE developmental for so long and had accolades from all the talent and has been one of the best and most accomplished trainers of the last 20 years and worked with everybody in the world, but he's going to be honest and say, no, this fucking guy has no business at all doing a 780-degree splash off the top rope because he can't grab a headlock. And they don't like to hear that. So that's the
yeah, it sounds like he's out of touch.
He's out of touch. What, you mean you expect me to learn my craft so that I can protect myself and be safe and protect my opponents with the basics and the fundamentals so that I don't just willy-nilly go out and break people's necks, including my own? Well, fie upon you, sir. I want to do a fucking frog splash. So, yes, the best trainer in the business is Danny Davis is retired in Florida and would tell everybody that they can fuck off and be fed fish heads, but Tom Pritchard would be available, but they're not going to call him because that would require their talent to be held to a higher standard of professionalism than they have learned on the indies. And they don't want to know that they don't know what the fuck they're doing.
Did you watch any of the other matches on Rampage?
Yes, I did. I'll have you know that Serena Deeb won the 5-minute challenge from Angelica Risk. And that was her name, Angelica Risk. And she took a hell of a risk getting in the ring with Serena Deeb. I wish I'd been Serena's manager one night only just for that pun.
I like what they're doing with Serena Deeb, I was going to say. I like that they're giving her something, 5-minute challenge. She goes out there. It's really all about her. She's kind of like the female Danielson right now. You watch her and you can't take your eyes off what she's actually doing in the ring. And she's really, really good at it. I've really enjoyed this. Mike Tenay may have a problem with the professor thing. I think I may know an attorney he can contact, but other than that, I really like that they're doing something with Serena Deeb, and it's something to make you care about Serena Deeb. I'm happy about this.
Yes. Well, remember a couple years ago, I said, here's a revolutionary concept for AEW. Put people they want to get over on television every week and have them beat somebody. But the problem is, again, there's always a problem. I like Serena. You like Serena. We all like Serena. As you mentioned, she's very good. She's getting dominant wins on TV every week. Their world champion didn't get this. Their world champion didn't get as many wins on television as Serena Deeb is. There's things there, and then they fly away. But anyway, the main event of this and what we were all waiting for, Brian, everybody on the well, I won't say everybody because there's our level-headed, logical audience, but a lot of the modern fans on the internet just lost their teetotal shit that Jay White showed up on AEW, right? You remember that because he's from Japan or from New Japan. The forbidden door again has been flung open.
There were some fans excited, although for a lot of people it was overshadowed immediately by Keith Lee.
Well, as it should have been, also because this guy's, shocking debut was to walk into the loading dock during a fight on a pre-tape. But nevertheless, Jay White from New Japan, he's here. I've never seen him wrestle. I've never seen him talk. So I'm going to watch this show, right, on Friday night. I'm going to see what all the shouting's about Jay White. And he did a promo. And now we found out, I said he's got an accent. I thought he was from England. I thought he was British. Come to find out, I guess he is from New Zealand. So even farther away from us. But that's what his accent is.
Oh, so they can get a group rate when they fly him and Tony Storm over.
There you go. And he did a promo at the start. You know, Mark Henry, that's what. We have not seen Paul White, the former Big Show, since about 3 weeks after he got signed and he had that one match on TV. We never see him do an interview. We never see him do anything. Mark Henry, they've signed him to be an announcer on a Friday night show. We now see him do a 45-second pre-tape. And so the biggest stars in the company are the ones in federal witness protection. So he hosts the promos. Jay White, okay promo. Nothing revolutionary, nothing great, didn't suck, wasn't rotten. It was an average, I would say, WWE style promo where he seemed to have memorized his verbiage and delivered it very well and with some feeling, but you could tell that it was a WWE kind of memorized style promo. Did you see it? Did you see this show at all?
I did see the show, actually, yes.
Okay, well, is that kind of a description that you feel is fair about his promo?
I did see a few people point out the way he used his hands. It was very much a trained way of using his hands while he was speaking. Look, a lot of these guys, this is the kind of promo they do. This is what they grew up watching.
Yeah. So it was what it was. It wasn't bad. Trent did one, not as good. It's kind of like if White's was an average WWE style TV type promo, Trent's was an average indie promo where a guy's holding a fucking camera phone. Jay White, positive. He looks in great shape. He's got some attitude when he comes out. He's got body language. We're apparently told he's got a lot of titles in Japan. Excrement made sure to mention that. He's got nice body language. He takes bumps well. He runs the ropes well. He's got aggression. I can see if he was in with somebody else of a higher level that, you know, you would have something here. I couldn't believe. Well, I could believe it, but when Trent comes out, I wrote, Jesus Christ, here comes Pockets too. So they have to insinuate this fucking clown into everything because Tony Khan is fascinated or fixated over him. But now have they not pigeonholed Jay White? Okay, he's supposedly a superstar and everybody's excited about it. He's wrestling a lower card guy on a totem pole. The mascot's out in the corner. And it's 10 minutes, everything he can do to beat Trent. So has he not already been pigeonholed as a middle card guy?
No, because it was the Friday night show, and I don't think people care too much about that. Although it was on earlier this week. It was actually the best time slot they've ever had on a Friday night.
Yeah, but that's how they seem, if that's how he's presented. If you're presenting it, okay, look, this guy's competitive with undercard people and the mascot's out, so it's the clown car crew, and he's not going to be in the fucking title picture. Here's nothing. On Friday nights, are they sweetening the audio? I noticed this because it's Friday night. Well, it's Friday night. It's the night after they're taping Dynamite. It's 11:40 or whatever by the time this thing's finished. So they need to watch that because it doesn't sound as believable as the WWE. They've had more experience at it. Anyway, so as far as Jay White's work, at first he was kind of working like the heel. Or actually, at first he was working like the babyface. Trent was kind of being heelish. Then Jay White was kind of working like the heel. And then I figured out that apparently this guy has been in Japan a lot more than he's been anywhere else. And it's one of those deals where both these guys were having a Japanese/indie style match where they just do shit back and forth and you can't tell who the heel is. And also, as it goes on, we'll find out the flaw, the chink in Jay White's armor. They went to a break after it was a nice belly to back on old Trent over the top rope to the floor for a break spot, and they come back. White's getting heat on Beretta. Now he's a heel. But then they rolled out. They both took a bump, rolled out on the floor for no reason. First, I think it was Jay White that just rolls out, and then Trent rolls out, and then he goes for a springboard backflip moonsault. Trent does off the ring onto Jay White on the floor and completely missed that motherfucker and did basically a frog splash, backflip splash off the top rope, 3 or 4 feet above the top rope, straight onto the goddamn floor. Did you see that? He went straight past him.
I did, and unfortunately it's not a unique occurrence in AEW or in modern wrestling. And this guy just got back from, a year off with a neck injury?
Yes. Why would you? That move made no sense in that placement, in this time, in this match. It wasn't called for. Even if he'd hit him, nobody would remember it tomorrow because they've already seen at that taping 18 million fucking dives and Dante Martin leaping tall buildings with a single bound. And he missed it anyway. But fortunately, even though Trent Beretta missed Jay White completely, obviously, including on the 3 replays that they replayed of the missed move, Jay White sold it anyway and laid there like he was dead, and Trent Beretta got right up and rolled Jay White back in the ring. That was a hospitalization angle. If you had planned to do this, people would have bought it. Whether it be in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and OVW in the 2000s, the 2010, today, if this was the climactic point of this match, and this fucking guy missed that goddamn splash and landed and laid there, and the referee called for the bell, and they stopped the match, and they brought an ambulance in the ring or into the arena and carried this motherfucker out, not a single soul would have said bullshit. But he just got right back up, and off we go. Because they don't know what they're doing, and they've never been taught, and they don't know not to even go for those moves. But if they go that wrong, what the fuck? At least sell it for a little while. If you don't want to fuck up the show, then don't goddamn change the finish on the fly, but sell the fucking thing. Anyway, moments later, White's up. He's fine. He's doing all kinds of shit. His shit looks great. But the problem is, apparently, his career has primarily been in Japan or on the indies, and he works the modern style. The matches don't make sense. This guy, you can tell, Jay White, if he could work with the Punks and the Danielsons, if this was the old days and he was in territory and he was working on top with veterans, this guy has the potential, from what I see, to be a fucking superstar. But he just doesn't know how to have a match or put it together because all he's done is the Japanese indie shit. And this was just a series of, I wrote it one, then I said, God, this is long. He does moves to the other guy. Then the other guy does moves to him. There's nobody to cheer for. There's nobody really to boo against. They're wrestling the same style. Nothing registers because they don't sell anything. There's no continuity to the fucking thing. And the finish drove this point home. And boom, 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 boom. Trent Beretta grabs Jay White, gives him a pile driver, cover, 2 count. He kicked out. Right after the pile driver, Jay White, as Trent is pulling Jay White to his feet, Jay White grabs Trent and hit what looked like a lesser, lower crossroads. 1, 2, 3. What the fuck? Literally, that was the series of events. The guy was pile driven and covered for a 2 count. He kicks out of a pile driver, like that isn't fucking ridiculous enough to begin with, and then stands up and grabs the guy that just pile drove him and gives him a finish. And the finish that he gave him, I would take that in a heartbeat before I would even fall from half the height that this stupid motherfucker did when he missed that moonsault, and he popped right back up to his feet. But this pissy little finish, he was dead. He was death warmed over on a fucking plate. Immediately after a pile driver, the other guy's fine, and the move was nowhere near the top 5 worst things to happen to Trent Beretta, but that was it. If Jay White is going to be around regularly, he is pigeonholed here to be a non-entity because, as I said, he beat a lower card guy. It was everything he could do. The match to watch moves was fine, I guess, but to look for talent and to see what everybody's raving about, no, this is another indie level guy that is in real good shape and does things better than most people, but still doesn't know how to put it all together. That's what I see. Your thoughts?
Well, the jury's still out for me. I'll watch him again when I see him again. I haven't watched too much of his stuff in New Japan because I've been kind of disinterested with New Japan the last few years. When you see he's going to wrestle Trent, you know what's going to happen already. He's going to win. It's going to go longer than it should. It's going to be more competitive than it should, considering it's supposed to be a main event caliber guy. And they're going to kick out everything, and that's exactly what happened. And then he wins, and it's one thing if a match like that breaks out and you don't know who's going to win, but when you already know exactly what's going to happen, why do all that stuff? But that's another story. We'll see. We'll see how he does in AEW. I did see, and this was kind of concerning, I guess he appeared at the Impact pay-per-view and reunited with original Bullet Club members, the Good Brothers. And I'm like, oh God, please don't bring those two back on the AEW TV because they are the worst. But we'll see what happens with Jay White and this Forbidden Door and New Japan and AEW's relationship. Reportedly, Tony Khan's working on something big. We'll see what it is.
Well, I'll tell you what, Tony better have a lot of irons in the fire. Keep this thing, if he's going to have to start renewing these contracts and paying these guys exorbitant amounts of money that they're going to be demanding, or elsewise they'll take their tights and go home. I know old Shad is a multi-billionaire, but do you think Tony has enough investments, Brian, to be able to weather the storm of navigating his way through this wrestling promoting deal?
If I had to guess, yeah, I'm sure Tony Khan has plenty of investments, probably some good ones too.
Well, what do you think he invests in?
What do I think he invests in? Well, probably the stock market, maybe some municipal bonds, and if he has the right person to monitor that, maybe some crypto. Of course, you got to have a crypto portfolio nowadays. I would have to think, being the son of a billionaire, I know if I was the son of a billionaire, I'd be all in on fine art.
Well, I thought you were going to say he was a son of something else when you started that. But being the son of the billionaire that he is, yes, fine art. But you know what? Fine art is no longer confined, Brian Last, to the rich and the wealthy and the hoity-toity and the upper percentiles. No, even regular human beings now, like you and me, Brian, at least me, can invest in fine art. Have you heard about this? Have you read about this?
I have heard about this. I have read about this.
Well, then I'll tell you about it. The folks at Masterworks, this is a new sponsor that we got on the program. They don't know what they're in for, and who knows how long they'll last. Hopefully they got a good sense of humor. But folks, I'll tell you, you never know what's going on. The stock market, the last several months, it's been up and down, back and forth. You don't know what's going on there. You don't know about investments anymore. You just mentioned the cryptocurrency and the Bitcoin and everything. That thing's yo-yoing all over the place. You don't know what you can trust anymore. Well, the folks at Masterworks, as a matter of fact, they sent me an email. They likened the art investment to wrestling. It says wrestling requires preparation, mental and physical. You don't just jump in the ring, but in wrestling, as we've seen, things can change on a dime, or in some cases, a missed moonsault. Then your plans are totally thrown out the window. Your spine needs realigned. You've got to readjust your taint, and you're in a body cast for a year and a half. The same thing can happen when it comes to investing. You can get the wind knocked out of you. You can get run over by a bread truck. You and your portfolio out in the street, flatter than a plate full of piss, needing a spatula to pick you up. You look like a grease spot, a stain on the pavement, Brian, from being run over by that investment truck. Well, not me, because I got Masterworks in my corner, Brian. And I'll tell you what, Masterworks lets normal guys, as I mentioned, like me and not you, diversify our portfolios with blue chip art from masters like Picasso, Monet, and Jack Kirby. Diversifying with art isn't new because the ultra wealthy have done it for centuries. And as you know, the blue chip art prices have outpaced the S&P 500, Brian, by 164% for the last 25 years. You've heard about this. You're a big-time investor. You and your Uncle Warren. Before he changed his name to Buffett, he was well known in the garment district up there. But it's an example like my Amazing Fantasy 15. I paid $25 for it. Actually, my mother did as a birthday present in 1973. And in 2017, I sold it for $25,000 because it was fine art. But if you can't afford a Van Gogh or a Picasso or even a Herb Trimpe, well, then you might be able to buy a piece of it. That's where Masterworks comes in, Brian. And if you go to Masterworks, then you will see the track record of art against investments. For example, did you know, Brian, that the annualized appreciation between 1995 and 2021 of contemporary art was 13.6%, and the U.S. housing was only 4.6%. And the correlation factor between contemporary art and gold, well, contemporary art's on the left side and gold is on the right side. So that tells you something right there. And if you measure contemporary art prices against real estate rates, you'll find that they cross in the middle at 2010. And that's a lot of trouble. So, folks, again, Masterworks is the key. If you don't have enough money to buy the whole Van Gogh, to buy the whole Mona Lisa, then you just invest what you've got, and maybe you get the Mona Lisa's left nostril. But when the Mona Lisa is sold, minus, of course, any costs involved, like picking the nose and cleaning the hair, then you get the money for the nose. The ultra wealthy have done this for centuries with the nose trade in the Middle Ages. Join the over 330,000 members of Masterworks. Get priority access to Masterworks with my unique link. You go to masterworks.art/Jim. Masterworks.art, ART/Jim. You know art. That's like, what do you call a guy with no arms and no legs hanging on the wall? Art. And you can see important disclosures at masterworks.io/disclaimer. But basically, you're investing in these blue chip pieces of art, and when they are sold, you reap a portion of the proceeds based on how many body parts of Mona Lisa you were managed to purchase before the sale took place. I want her left nipple.
Well, no, it doesn't work like that. You're buying a piece of equity. You're not buying a piece of the actual...
Well, you're buying a piece of it. You know, you got a piece of equity in it. When it's sold, you get your portion of the money. But I want to take a specific piece of the art that I've bought. I ought to be able to have a left ear or a right nostril or the middle nipple or something whenever I want it.
You can have whatever piece of the Mona Lisa you want.
Well, there you go. I'll tell you what, this girl I knew one time in Jackson, Mississippi, her middle nipple was incredible.
All right. Come on. Let's stay
on
target. Well, speaking of Masterworks, Jim, we'll find out if any Masterworks have been sent in by the listeners this week in the form of questions, but I did want to ask you one myself. Recently, Greg Oliver at Slam Wrestling did a tremendous write-up, longer than I thought it was going to be, quite frankly, when I started reading it. I was happy about that, but he did a whole story about Terry Justice, one of the early pioneers when it comes to whether you want to call them newsletters or bulletins, fan sheets. And he is someone you actually knew, someone you were actually around. And I'm wondering what you thought of the article, if you read it, and also any memories you might have of Terry Justice. And of course, the article touched on a lot of different things. What are your thoughts?
Well, I did. And for those of you, if you want to hunt it down, it's slamwrestling.net, slamwrestling.net. And Greg Oliver posted this on February 2nd. The title of the article was Terry Justice Briefly, King of Newsletters. And it had, I have this bulletin, the the last one that was sent out was after that Terry was killed in a car accident, a drunk driver, and his brother Scott, he was twin brothers, and he put out the last issue of his newsletter and sent it out to everybody that had been contributing clippings and etc. and was on Terry's list. And I'll read the closing and then we'll talk about Terry a little bit. But it said, "Dear friends, this is the final issue of TNT Times, a tribute to my twin brother, Terry Robert Justice. Terry went to be with the Lord in the early hours of the first day of spring. The first clips in this bulletin deal with his death." And I'll ad-lib for a second here. There was a lot of coverage locally there. He was a really popular guy in his home community. He did work with, kids and coaching and stuff. And so that his death was covered. And then they printed some of the articles that he had contributed to magazines and things, and some clippings that some people had sent in after Terry's death. And he goes on to say, "There are many people in the sport of professional wrestling who Terry appreciated and loved very much. He did a lot for the sport. The sport did a lot for him. Our family is grateful to all who were Terry's friends. Although this is the final issue of TNT Times, I would really appreciate everyone acknowledging receiving it. The reason for that is because I know Terry would want me to make sure each of you got a copy." And I got this, and I had known, I can't remember now, it might have been Brian Hildebrand that let me know. But back in those days before the internet and etc., in wrestling, everybody called people on the phone to give news, and it was hard for a lot of times for people to get in contact with you if you were on the road. So some people in wrestling and some of the fans actually got this in the mail, and that was how they found out that Terry had been killed. As a matter of fact, this article goes on to say it was Sunday morning, March 21st, 1982. Terry was driving one of the amateur wrestlers on his local teenage team to a meet, and they left early in the morning so that they could get there. And at like 5 o'clock in the morning, the drunk driver coming the other way crossed over the median or whatever, and it was a head-on deal. And of course, that guy was in satisfactory condition at the hospital, after the wreck, as usual. But Terry was he was a very nice guy. He was very soft-spoken, and he was real religious and real straight-laced and everything, but he was just so nice. And he loved wrestling, and he wanted to be involved with, spreading news to the fans and everything. And when he met Eddie Gilbert, who was just starting to wrestle at that point, he just turned 18. He'd been wrestling on a few outlaw shows in Arkansas since he couldn't get a license and or be used by Jarrett Promotions. But Terry Justice started the Tommy and Eddie Gilbert fan club. So he was doing TNT Power, which was a really thick, nicely put together bulletin on the Tommy. TNT Power came from Eddie Gilbert. Originally, it was going to be Tommy Gilbert Jr., Tommy and Tommy. But he also did the regular bulletins, just the TNT Times that contained other clippings, and he'd do encyclopedias of wrestling, which would be retrospectives on stars from the past with a lot of clippings focused on them. And he sent this stuff out incessantly and to everybody, paying for it out of his own pocket if you sent him a clipping or whatever. And so again, he was, at the WFIA conventions, he went, I was there with him. I think he was there in 79 and 80. And his favorite thing in the world was, remember, Brian, when Howard Johnson's was a fairly successful chain, not only of roadside hotels, but the Howard Johnson's restaurant.
Yeah. With
the hotel, he loved the fried clams. That was the deal. That apparently they didn't have a Howard Johnson's. I don't know where he was from. Every time he'd come down south to go to the matches or whatever, he would live at Howard Johnson's and eat the fried clams. I don't know if I'd have gone to Howard Johnson's even back then for seafood or not, but nevertheless, it meant a lot to him. But he, again, just a great guy. And these things, the newsletters came out suddenly and everybody loved them and they were so cleanly done. And, and again, told you about all this stuff that was going on in the world of wrestling. And he did them for like 2 years. And I've got in my closet 3 or 4 2-foot tall stacks that he did just in that couple of years. And then suddenly, boom, he was dead.
It's a great article. People should check it out. Greg Oliver did a great job with it. It also goes into something that I heard from a lot of people who were around at that time, that what started as a fan club for Tommy Gilbert Jr. or Eddie Gilbert really became in a lot of ways an obsession with Eddie Gilbert, which led to them separating their ways, not just him and Eddie, but him and the entire Gilbert family, because they were all involved with everything, Peggy and Tommy Sr.
Yeah, well, I think, again, I won't say obsession in a bad way, but he really wanted to be Eddie's best friend. And it just got uncomfortable, the amount of contact at some points, but at the same time, it wasn't like, if I can't have you, no one can, I'm going to kill you. It's just like, oh, Eddie, look what I did. Or, oh, Eddie, I really, and sometimes those things can happen. But because, again, Terry was such a nice guy. This article goes on to talk about the amusing antidote. Somebody the other day corrected me on Twitter. Like, it's anecdote. Yeah, I know that's the idea. Dr. Jerry Graham moved in with the Justice family for like a fucking year, right? And Donnie Leibel, who I've known since the mid-'70s, also another long-time old fan that traded things through the mail and etc. But basically, they met at a show in Rochester. I don't know what Dr. Jerry Graham was doing at that particular point in time there, but they invited him over to the house and he just stayed. He didn't leave. He didn't have anything at the time. We've told these stories about Jerry Graham bouncing from place to place, and he lived in their living room on the couch for fucking a long time. And,
it's one of the places when Jerry Graham had to leave, he left a big shit in the bathtub. Because wasn't that his reputation too?
Well, I don't know whether he was doing it on purpose or it was just a habit and, he forgot to clean it up or whatever. But he was, they were feeding him. And, then, well, as a matter of fact, hold on. Wait a minute. The story. Yes. What did Graham leave behind? The bathtub was covered with feces. That was kind of like his goodbye note to us. Sometimes in wrestling, when people are that nice, they get taken advantage of. And sometimes when they're that nice, other people, it makes them uncomfortable. But, you couldn't say anything bad about the guy otherwise than he crowded you a little bit if he liked you, or he was too nice to you if you were taking advantage of him.
Jim, our next question sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Pierre in Oxfordshire, United Kingdom.
Say that again.
I hope you two are well. My question is for you, Jim. I wanted to know, when did you first meet CM Punk, and if you thought he would be the big star that he is today?
Oh, God. Originally, I saw him before I met him. And no, honestly, I didn't get it. But part of it was, well, I didn't get it because there wasn't a lot to get at that point. I guess I have to explain the political relationships of Louisville wrestling. When I came back to Louisville in 1999 to work with Danny Davis in Ohio Valley Wrestling, and my God, I can't believe the people who thought that my Danny Davis was the referee from the WWF. When we did that clip a few weeks ago, I didn't know they were, what the fuck? Of course they were different people. But anyway, at that time, and we've talked about it, and I'm not going to go off on a tangent, but Ian Rotten and the IWA garbage hardcore wrestling promotion that had been at that point just kicked out of the state of Kentucky and caused all the problems with the commission and everything, was still running in Indiana where there was no commission. And at that time, and these were just names to me, I didn't even, at the time, I hadn't even seen these wrestlers. I just saw names reported in newsletters. The top guys that Ian Rotten was using were CM Punk, Colt Cabana, and Chris Hero. So I saw those names, but had no idea, what to put together. And Danny's rule, and I wholeheartedly agreed with it and continued to uphold it, was that no wrestler that ever worked for Ian Rotten would ever work for Ohio Valley Wrestling. And it's not like we're shooting ourselves in the foot like, oh, we won't be able to get Hulk Hogan, because look, again, people may look now at Chris Hero and CM Punk, maybe not Colt Cabana, fondly of these big level start. No, they were rookie guys starting out on the Outlaws at that point. They had no name value. Nobody that was working for Ian Rotten was ever going to be a benefit to us, except if he brought a name in every once in a while, we could do the same thing. But what that did was that told any of the wrestlers in this area that if you take that step and you work for the garbage folks that have brought shame and dishonor on wrestling with the commission here and the authorities in Louisville and TV stations, you're never going to be involved with us because we're trying to run a real company. We don't want the publicity. There's going to be no confusion whatsoever that we are a different wrestling company to even the most casual observer than the garbage folks. So one time I met Chris Hero first before either one of them, because I just happened to be, I can't even remember what the name of the place was, but when we still shot TV over in Jeffersonville, Indiana, we went someplace to get something to eat. They had pool tables in the back. I go to the bathroom, and a guy with long hair introduces himself, says, I'm Chris Hero. I said, oh, and that's at that time, about the opportunity of wrestling in OVW. And I was honest with him. I said, look, it ain't ever going to happen because we can't be affiliated with this guy and what he's done. And that's Danny Davis's rule, and he's the majority owner, and I'm not going to try to talk him out of it. I wish that could be different. I'd never seen Chris work at that point, so I was just being nice because I didn't have anything against him. That was 2000 or so. Well, by 2006, number one, I'm gone. Number two, Colt Cabana gets signed to a developmental deal, and so does CM Punk. And at various points, and I don't know whether, no, Hero never, I don't think ever made it to OVW, but at various points in that time period, Danny relented because they'd been signed by WWE. But that's how, you think I carry a grudge a long time. You try to get Danny Davis to change his mind when somebody has fucked him or his company around. He relented and let him come in because they had WWF contracts. I had already gone when CM Punk came to OVW. So I seen a match or two, and I didn't get it. But that's because I hadn't heard him talk. And by the time that he got up there and started talking, and then I saw a couple of the matches in the WWF, then I started being a bigger fan, and finally the pipe bomb and the whole way that he played him on the way out and everything. I said, okay, I'm not going to say that CM Punk is my idea of Ric Flair, Ricky Steamboat in the ring, but he has a unique promo ability, and the way he thinks about things, all of his shit is logical and makes sense. And he also has the guts to stand up for himself, like Mick Foley did when he would quit WCW, when Ole was booking, rather than get beaten into powder. When Punk didn't want to be a guy to just come back and do bad television. Now he does good segments on a sometimes bad TV show, but at least his is good. As far as when I'm trying to think now, when did I first meet him? I can't remember. Maybe he's listening. Send me an email. Tell me when I first actually met you in person, Punk.
It must have been Ring of Honor when you were going there when the Midnight Express did their reunion.
No, he wasn't there then.
He wasn't?
I don't think he was he?
Were you there when Steamboat was there? Because didn't Punk do something with Steamboat?
Well, but Steamboat did several things. I was there for one. I'm trying to think. It was sometime around that time period. I don't remember the exact place or the circumstances. But you know, once we're in the wrestling business, when you meet somebody, well, then you know them forever. but no, and now and possibly, you know what? I'm not even saying this to knock anybody, but Punk may be part of the Ole Anderson principle. It's just that now so many other dumb fucks have come along that don't know anything about the business that he's Einstein. Whereas before he may have been just right up there.
Or maybe he's pretty good.
Or maybe even pretty good.
All right, well, Jim, this next question was sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from, there's no name here, from Tom. Since Brock won the WWE Championship at Elimination Chamber and will face Roman Reigns at WrestleMania for the Universal Championship, do you think that the WWE will end the brand split? How do you feel about this? Do you think all the talent cuts over the past year or so have been related to the possible plan that WWE is going to have one singular roster for both Raw and SmackDown? How would this impact creative, advertising? And how many more wrestlers should the WWE cut? Or what is the ideal amount of wrestlers to have on one roster with 2 weekly programs? So, to sum all of that up, Jim, what about the idea they use this opportunity to end the brand split?
Well, I've heard, I haven't been in on the network television conference calls, but I've heard that the idea is that, well, Fox doesn't want the champion from the USA Network and vice versa. They want whatever. I've heard people try to justify it by saying that. You can't tell me that if Vince McMahon went to both networks and said, look, we're going to have different rosters on the programs, but we're going to have one champion that goes back and forth and is the top guy in our entire universe, and he will appear on both shows, but it will mean better ratings for both because he will be over and a bigger deal instead of the muddy multiple champions. As far as all those other, what's the ideal amount of wrestlers? There is none. How many can you pay for? How many good ones do you have access to? How many do you want? They had way too many, and they had a bunch of people, and they've cut a bunch of people. They've cut some people that was a benefit to their competition, and they've cut other people that I bet the employees of the WWE don't even notice they're gone for a few weeks. That meant nothing. So it's not about cutting a certain number or keeping a certain number. It's about keeping the right ones that can do you some good and the ones you intend to use. And maybe some projects for the future. But again, I can understand having, because of the difference in the networks, if it was 2 shows on the same network or the same under the same ownership umbrella, that'd be one thing. Since it's not, yes, they might want different rosters, but not different. And you could have a North American champion on one, a United States champion on other, whatever the fuck, with the tag belts, whatever, but a world champion. That's what's hurting them. And they've only got a couple of guys that mean anything in a world title match. So you're diluting that even further when you do this other stuff. So all the rest of the questions, yeah. But yes, they should take this opportunity to unify the championship and then have one dominant guy that goes to both sides. And that way you could get a lot more mileage. And you could keep focus on one guy. You can't, I've said this a million times, but it's still true, and I'll end with this. If you'd have gone to Hulk Hogan in 1986 and said, okay, we're going to have 2 champions, and we're going to make the other one, he'd go, whoa. You're not going to have 2 champions if I'm around, or if you do, I won't be around. That would have been the end of it.
Well, perhaps if there were 2 champions back then, Hulk Hogan would have said, this is not what I signed up for. Maybe I should go back to Vern, but I have this contract. I wish I had a lawyer to help me get out of it.
That's right. And if he had at that time, if he had known that there was a young little whippersnapper over in Beckley, West Virginia that was soon to enter high school and would gradually become an attorney, then he would have known who to call. This man.
Call Stephen P. If you need to sue. An outlaw mud show or two. Still to the rest.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, Stephen P. New is the man for you. NewLawOffice.com, 888-692-8084. We've talked in recent weeks about the suits that are in the process of being filed. They've already started, and they're adding more every day for the babies addicted to opioid, with the childhood opioid withdrawal syndrome that they went through. Not only if you happen to be the parents of a child that was afflicted with that, but if your foster parents, grandparents, adoptive parents, or in some way the birth parents are not in the picture and you're not sure about these things, track these things down and contact Stephen P. New at newlawoffice.com, 888-692-8084 in order to get involved in these class action suits in multiple states. You don't have to be in West Virginia. These are being filed on behalf of people all across the country. And also, Stephen P. New, as we've mentioned, is a title sponsor for the World Classic Professional Big Time Wrestling event promoted by Bobby Fulton and his son in Chillicothe, Ohio on Saturday, March 12th, where they've got literally, I told Bobby Fulton, if there was to be a nuclear incident in Chillicothe on March 12th, the entire wrestling industry would be decimated. Everybody from Kevin Nash and Kurt Angle and the Steiner brothers to Tully and J.J. Dillon and Barry Windham. And, of course, the ever-popular Bobby and Jackie Fulton themselves reunited, the third version of the Fantastics. But anyway, that's March 12th in Chillicothe. Stephen P. New is a sponsor of that. Stephen P. New is filing suits on behalf of Cult of Cornette members across the country. And he can do the same thing for you. 888-692-8084. And we know he may not answer his own phone, but he does his own callbacks. NewLawOffice.com.
Well, let's get a few more questions and wrap things up, Jim. Several questions have come in to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com about apparently a new promotion. Before I read anything, Jim, have you seen anything about the promotion CYN, Control Your Narrative?
I actually thought it was a Crosby, Stills, and Nash box set for a second. Then I realized I had the initials slightly wrong. I have seen this on the internet, not familiar with all the details.
All right, here's the official statement from CYN. EC3, Adam Scherr, set to launch new wrestling company. Now, of course, Jim, Adam Scherr is the former Braun Strowman. And you know EC3, correct?
Yes. Yeah, he's a nice kid. I've met him, worked on a couple of events with him.
CYN Live announces first two live events. March 5th, Orlando, Florida, and March 31st, Dallas, Texas. Network TV deal announcement imminent.
Uh-oh.
The Control Your Narrative concept has manifested itself from an idea to a movement to a live touring televised wrestling company. We, collectively as wrestlers, can no longer wait. We can no longer wait on companies that answer only to shareholders. Companies where billionaires collect talent as toys. Companies that fire their entire roster for the mistakes their office made.
Ooh!
Companies that are complacent in presentation. All talent featured in CYN have asked to be a part of the project. These competitors range from known to unknown, including names like Matt Cardona, Moose, John Schuyler, Matt Sydal, Marina Shafir, Weston Blake, Matt Taven, and more.
Boy, and by the way, let me just say that I haven't seen Matt Taven work in several years, but in 2011 and 2012, I thought he was one of the guys that was probably going to be one of the top names in the business at this point in time, but he apparently has yet to get any really big breaks.
On March 31st, CYN Dallas, the much anticipated debut of Killer Cross takes place. The one thing missing for CYN to become who they are supposed to be was a proper platform and network distribution. That has been achieved.
Oh boy.
And that's the end of the statement. Control your narrative.
Okay. I was with them till they got to the TV part. A lot of the guys, I think that Jonathan Gresham is starting something. I guess he lives in Atlanta. That's his area. He started something down there. A lot of the guys are starting their own promotions. Why not? With the internet now and some of the buzz these guys have, and the fact that they're incorporating into their mission statement here the fact that most wrestling fans hate the WWE as a company, the people that run it, the McMahon family, the evil empire, and they feel like the wrestlers are downtrodden, which there's an element of truth to that. And Tony Khan's the only popular wrestling promoter these days, and he's probably not going to maintain that for long because they'll get mad at him sooner or later. So it's an idea and if you can put on a show and draw 500 people and do some merchandise of whatever, maybe with the streaming that's available these days, some of the guys, if they have a business mind and a good building and a good locality, they can come out ahead, give their friends some work and some payoffs, and everybody prospers. When they start trying to say, and now a network TV deal,
imminent.
Bobby Eaton said this to me on the phone one time. He said, Corny, he said, what was the count? What the three most fearsome words are, the three words that you hear in wrestling that you should be most scared of. Three words are, I've got TV. Because, oh boy, here we go. No, they don't have network television. If they did, they wouldn't have been able to keep it quiet. Somebody would know about it. I can understand how Tony Khan was able to keep it under wraps for a while, although certain people knew before it was announced. But because he was talking directly to a TBS executive that he already had a relationship with based on the professional football teams, etc., that he owned. And even then, it was around in the wrestling business before it really got announced. These guys didn't just land a network. Now, what network? Is it, fucking America One Network that broadcasts on W6AY7 in Ottumwa, Iowa?
That's an important question. Do guys today realize that the term network actually was supposed to mean a network of channels that were affiliates of one main channel?
No, they don't know that. The original network, the meaning of network is the Columbia Broadcasting System, CBS, in New York, wanted to televise shows on a national basis, so they wanted a local television station in every television market, New York at number 1 and Los Angeles number 2, on down to Scranton and fucking Easton or whatever. So they had a station in every town, and that was the network that broadcast their programs. Well, now the network has been broadened to, TBS is a cable network, even though really the network term no longer applies because it's one entity broadcasting and being beamed everywhere rather than a network of stations picking it up. But still, they call them networks. But now that a lot of wrestlers getting in the wrestling business with a peripheral knowledge of television, and to them, anything's a network. Again, Smoky Mountain Wrestling was on 3 different networks in the 1990s. The America One Network, Channel America, and something else that serviced low power and independent stations in small markets that couldn't even afford to buy the most basic syndication packages or programming to fill out their schedule, and they had to rely on things that they could run that were in the public domain or were being fed by their parent network that got wrestling programs, infomercials, travel logs, whatever the fuck. Now, you can get on one of those networks. Ain't nobody going to see you. The only reason that the reason to be on those networks was not to expand your business or to run live events in those places, but to run the 1-800 per inquiry spots, 1-800 buy this shit, that you had a dedicated telephone number. When somebody called and bought the Popeel Pocket Fisherman, you got $2.14 or whatever. That was the only reason you were on those airs. There's a deal now, OVW here in town now, and the new ownership of Al Snow, and from what I can tell, is a varied investment group here in Louisville. My cousin knows a doctor that owns a piece of it now. I don't know what they're pulling over there. They're on TV here in Louisville every time you turn around, but it's on a local low-power station on an off-peak time, and then they've got some network primetime airings, but on these low-power stations or U2 America Network or whatever. It's like being on C-SPAN. Everybody's got C-SPAN on their cable. You got to be a really bored motherfucker to watch C-SPAN. So it's available in 90 million homes, and it's watched by 1,742. So anyway, point is, I'm not shitting on their wrestling promotion, but I'm shitting on them saying they've got network television. And boy, they better have CBS on fucking Tuesday night at 8:00 if they're making this grand prediction and grand proclamation right now, or they're going to look like fucking spare pricks at the wedding. That's what I think.
Well, they said imminent, and that station came out several days ago, so we'll see just how imminent is, I assume. But Jim, let's get another question here. Several people have sent this in. That's someone that I know that you knew. Any thoughts on the recent passing of Candy Divine?
Oh, gosh. I saw that, and then we recorded the program we just did a few days ago, and I forgot to bring it up. But I sure was sorry to hear about that. I had no idea she was in bad health. Apparently, that's been for some time. She was only 3 years older than I am. And I've met her at the Memphis WFIA convention in 1979. And there was some snickering at the time because she was the president of the Leap and Lanny Poffo fan club, because we were in Memphis and Jerry Jarrett, his promotion was hosting the fan fest or the fan convention, but there was still the ongoing thing with the Poffos and ICW. Actually, it had just started. At that point. Yeah. It had just started. And there she was coming as a fan, but everybody knew she went to the ICW matches, and she was Lanny Poffo's fan club president. And as strange as it sounds, they were keeping an eye on her to see if she was trying to report back anything or stooge or whatever. Because that's how, in promotional wars in those days, you got the little minions to go out and sniff around.
If I may stop you real quick and we'll jump back to where you're going, correct me if I'm wrong. She was the person at the gym outside of Nashville that tipped off all the ICW guys coming back from Memphis that Bill Dundee was there, didn't she?
That's the story I always heard. That was in 1981, I believe. So that was a couple of years after the fact. That was after, see, the ICW, if they had a girls match, it would be two local girls that were already in the business. There was no such thing as a women's division then on any promotion, especially an outlaw promotion on a shoestring budget. And she wanted to wrestle, and they didn't, have any spot for her. So she started, training wherever she could and working outlaw shows. And eventually, by the time that she got kind of recognized in the business, the ICW had gone out of business, and she ended up working later on for Jarrett a few times and having runs in the AWA with her and Sherry. And, she was on a variety in the 80s. She was on a variety of the big events that the remaining territories put on, because Moolah and all of Moolah's girls were beholden to and working with Vince Sr., and then later with Vince Jr. So after 1984, Moolah's girls mostly didn't work the territories. They were booked exclusively through Vince. After the first couple of years, there were still stragglers. So Candy and Sherry Martel and a few of the other girls that weren't hooked up with Moolah got more opportunities in more different places.
Debbie Combs
was another one. Debbie and Cora Combs was not only, nobody alive still remembers this, but she was not only one of the top box office attractions and one of the top girl wrestlers in the country in the early 50s. She was one of the prettiest. Holy mackerel. Cora Combs in her younger days was gorgeous. She's from Eastern Kentucky, little small town. And so Cora obviously settled in Nashville. She had worked out of the Nashville booking office for years, but she lived there and her daughter Debbie grew up there. So by that point, they didn't need Moolah. Cora Combs could get her daughter not only trained, but in the wrestling business, just couldn't get her booked in the WWF because that was Moolah's thing with Vince. And so Debbie Combs was another girl that all over the Southeastern, the independents and some of the territories, she was one of the girls that wasn't hooked up with Moolah, so she could get booked for them as well. And geez, it was a small group, but they kept things fresh. But for a lot of the 80s, it was basically Debbie Combs, Candy Devine, Sherry Martel was in that mix. A girl named Donna Day.
Yeah. Then there was the Misty Blue Clique. That was a whole nother camp.
Well, yeah, and that
did other things also on the side.
Well, yeah, and they didn't last as long. All the magazines liked Misty Blue because she was blonde and had the hoo-has, and they could put her on the cover. But her girls were nice enough. But that was the worst bunch of female wrestlers I've ever. And that's even talking about watching the current AEW programs. They were still. Linda Dallas was the most hilarious one because she was like 4'9" and had like a 48 triple D chest, and her center of gravity was 3 inches below the fucking ground. And oh boy, on one of the LPWA TV tapings, Terry Power, this good-looking, bodybuilding girl, she was just so nice and such a sweet girl and a baby face. She tried to give Linda Dallas that compact squat frame, a superplex, off the turnbuckles. When she picked her up, she had to strain so hard, she pissed herself. Me and Joe Pedicino were right down below that corner. And he missed it because he was looking at the monitor and I was looking straight up at it. And it was like a fire hose for about 5 seconds. I said, "You see that?" He said, "What?" I said, "You didn't see it then." Strained her milk, as Mama Cornette would say.
Hey, that famous photo from 1980 in Atlanta of all the different fans wearing their wrestling T-shirts. You're wearing the Jerry Lawler shirt.
Yes, 1970. It was 1980. That was the famous photo was 1979 in Memphis. That's where that was.
Oh, okay. I thought that was 1980 in Atlanta. Okay, well, I'm wrong then. The photo of everyone wearing the T-shirts.
Yeah.
She's in that photo.
Yes.
You could see some of the other fans there.
Yes.
Excuse me for saying she was a lot prettier than the average fan attending the WFIA convention.
Hey, I don't know. Don't tell Eloise Mascoro's husband, Gilbert, that she wasn't an attractive, even though she was in her 70s at the time. Yes, well, that's the thing. You saw, in those days, you saw pretty girls at the matches constantly. They were pouring out of the fucking place. But they weren't they weren't smart. They weren't the smart fans. They weren't the kind of fans that went to the conventions. It was the rudimentary early conventions there was only really one at that point, the WFIA. And there'd be like 60 fans. And those 60 or maybe 70 fans total and everybody involved in the WFIA, that represented a good percentage of all of the smart fans in each territory that weren't hooked up with the promotion in some way. all the fans that went to the WFIA, except for Eloise Mascoro, still believed in the Von Erichs. But the fans that went to the WFIA conventions were the early smart fans, and they would kayfabe amongst themselves. If somebody came to a convention that hadn't been there before, the others that went every year would talk to them and kind of feel them out as to what they knew about the wrestling business, so they knew what to say in front of them. The fans then cared more about kayfabing than the wrestlers do now. And if they thought that, because every once in a while, some fan or a girl that was a fan of some of the baby faces thought, well, I can, get close to them or whatever, would be involved, and they would want to make sure that they didn't smarten up anybody that wasn't already smart, as, and either ruin it for them or hurt the business or whatever. But those fans were smart. And that did not include at that time very many, if any, pretty girls. But there was fucking hundreds of them at the arena. They didn't care who won, who lost. They weren't wanting to find out who the booker was, and they didn't want to know next week's finishes. They just wanted to know, is Bill Dundee stopping at the liquor store at the Arthur Street exit tonight? Because we'll be there.
But in that photo, and again, we're talking about the limited group of the WFIA.
Yeah.
She stood out. Was that a topic of conversation among some of you guys at the convention?
Well, no, because we knew that she had a crush on Leapin' Lanny and she was president of his fan club. And I was already a photographer, so I was nervous to be talking to her because I didn't want to be talking to anybody from ICW in case I'd get heat. It wasn't like anybody ostracized her, but no, they, she's got a crush on Lanny, and she came, and potentially she's going to try to find out something about the Memphis crew that she can go back and tell them about. That's why some people were looking sideways at her that knew what was going on with this promotional issue.
Hey, when I first got to know Tracy Smothers really well in '94, sometimes when he was on the road, I would deal with his girlfriend, Rose. Was that Candy Divine's sister?
Sister, yes. Rose Runnels.
Well, there it is. Candy Divine, or as she was famously called at the Blackjack Brawl for the UWF, Candy Divian.
Yeah. They must have got Bruiser's ring announcer for that one. But yes, but the point is, I've hated to hear that she passed away. I didn't know she was ill. Apparently she had some health problems. And I mean, she hasn't wrestled probably in the last 15 years or so, but she, same as a lot of us did. She was a fan. She loved the business. She persevered. She got into it. And she had fun at it and traveled the world.
Before we wrap things up, another quick question or two. Jim, several people have sent this in, and I don't know how much interaction you would have had, but any thoughts about the WWE releasing Carlos Cabrera, who's been the Spanish announcer for, according to this, 29 years?
Yeah, and I gotta be honest, at this point, I didn't know because I don't listen to the Spanish commentary. I was surprised he was still there just because he was there when I was there. And I was like, geez, that's a long time. Carlos, I don't know what was going on with their TV situation in the Hispanic-speaking areas of the world, or if he wasn't doing his job well, because I can't speak Spanish. I wouldn't be able to tell, but he's been there for 30 years. And I always had great interaction with him at the studio if he came in to do voiceovers or at the pay-per-view events. Smiling guy, seemed prepared, wearing a suit. I can't, as I said, critique his job performance at all because I don't know what the fuck he was saying. But did they want to just get younger people, or was there some problem with that they had with him, or is it a problem he had with them? Maybe. I know he and Hugo Savinovich were, the team for years. And then Hugo has been back with the WWF in the last 20 years at some point. Was he not?
Because at some point, we just talked about him recently, and I can't remember what the context was.
Well, and I mean, I guess I'm bringing up something now from a while back, but it's not like that this wasn't knowledge. I'm not stooging on somebody or slandering them in public. Hugo and Carlos were the Spanish announce team for quite some time. I think Hugo had been there longer than Carlos had, back to the 80s. And at some point, it was at 97 or 98, it was while I was up there, let's say Hugo unfortunately fell under the sway of some bad habits. And do you remember a period of time in the 90s where his voice sounded like Jake Roberts with sandpaper?
Actually, I don't.
Okay, well, it did for months and months and months. And there wasn't my department, so I didn't know what was going on. But apparently, the straw came when Hugo's name was in the local paper there in Stamford from a police raid on a residence that had unsavory materials contained within, and he was part of the issue. And he went away for a while. I guess he came back at some point, all was forgiven, and let's just put it this way, if he sounded like that 25 years ago and he's still speaking, apparently, obviously, he fixed whatever the issue was, let's say. But so I can understand that they may have having issues with Hugo, but I've never heard of any problem with Carlos. All I can say is he's a nice guy, and as far as I knew, they were happy with him for all those years. I don't know what happened recently. But now apparently he and Hugo got back together on an outlaw show here just this past weekend, I saw on the internet, because to Spanish-speaking countries and markets, Hugo and Carlos are kind of like Jim Ross and Jerry Lawler. They were the voice of the company when it was at its hottest. So
should AEW grab them? Just based on that alone.
Do they do Spanish TV, or do they have Andre Olio doing their Spanish announcing?
Well, they used to have Alex Abrahantes. That's how we first discovered him. Oh. All of a sudden, he started interviewing Penta, and then he started talking for him, and then he was a manager.
Well, I mean, he knows Carlos knows what's going on, and he knows how to do television. I don't know if they need another Spanish announcer, but if they do, he's probably on the short list of people who have the most experience in the world.
I'd be okay with him replacing either Shivani, Excalibur, or Jim Ross on Dynamite.
You know, he could probably do a better job in English being his second language than some of them are doing on the first at this point.
But with that, the drive-thru is closed.
Boom!
Boom.
You're back in tune.
Back in tune. Don't get used to it. We'll be staying in tune this weekend on the Jim Cornette Experience. Wherever you find your favorite podcast. Don't know why I yelled that. But we'll be back next week right here on the drive-thru.
Lifestyles of the rich and famous. I'm screaming and I don't know why.
Wherever you find your favorite podcast. Of course, you get access to the archive of the drive-thru and the experience going back to the very beginning in 2013. Patreon.com/Cornette. For only $5 a month, you get access to the archive. Patreon.com/Cornette. Don't forget to subscribe to the official Jim Cornette YouTube channel for full episodes, clips of episodes, omnibus collections, and so much more. Almost 280,000 subscribers and growing by the day. Subscribe today. The official Jim Cornette YouTube channel. You can follow Jim on Twitter at @TheJimCornette. You can follow me on Twitter at GreatBrianLast. You can hear me on the 605 Superpodcast at 605pod.com or available wherever you find your favorite podcasts. Don't forget about the bane of Hotchkiss Featherbottom's existence. I can't speak. Cornette's Collectibles at JimCornette.com. What do you got to say for yourself?
Well, I'll tell you what, if you want the t-shirts, the pictures, the DVDs, and the membership certificates, and the behind the curtains, before we get bogged down with the action figures on sale March 5th, get them now. The other things, I mean, and March 5th, Saturday at noon Eastern, the final remaining action figure variants go on sale. When these are gone, they're gone.
And then we'll be gone. But of course, at JimCornette.com. The drive-thru is brought to you by the law office of Stephen P. New, 888-692-8084. Get even with Stephen at newlawoffice.com. But until this weekend on The Experience, and next week right back here on the drive-thru, for Jim Cornette, I'm the Great Brian Last. Tally-ho!